Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are delighted to welcome all of you to Universitas Sebelas Maret and to this conference. I am Suci Faniandari, and I will be the master of ceremony for today's event. First of all, we're delighted to welcome the Honorable Professor Sajidan as Vice Rector for Planning, Partnership, Business and Information Affairs, Universitas Sebelas Maret. The Honorable Dr. Mardiana as Dean of Faculty of Teacher Training and Education, Universitas Sebelas Maret. Professor Slamet Subiantoro as Vice Dean for Academic Research and Student Affairs. Dr. Dewi Kusumawardani, the Vice Dean for Human Resources, Finance and Logistic Affairs. Dr. Jono as Vice Dean for Planning, Partnership and Information Affairs. The Honorable Professor Sulistyo Saputro as Chairman of the International Conference on Science Education and Technology 2022. And to the Honorable our keynote speakers, Assistant Professor Wang Yen Xiao from Natural Sciences and Science Education, National Institute of Education, Singapore. Dr. Muhammad Ikhwan bin Mat Saad from University Pendidikan Sultan Idris, Malaysia. Dr. Jose Manuel Diego Mantecan, the Deputy Director of the Department of Mathematics, Statistics and Computation, University of Cantabria, Spain. Professor Sutarno, the Dean of the Graduate School, Universitas Sebelas Maret, Indonesia. We also take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Murni Ramli from Faculty of Teacher Training and Education and Professor Fitria Rahmawati from Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Sciences, Universitas Sebelas Maret as the moderators for today's conference. And to our beloved guests and audiences, welcome to the International Conference on Science Education and Technology 2022. It is an honor for us to welcome all of you to this conference. We appreciate you taking time off your busy schedule to join us today. Taking the theme of shaping the science education of tomorrow, within today's technology, literacy, and social culture, we hope this conference to be fruitful and engaging to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, the next agenda, please join to listen our national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Please have a nice seat.
Indonesia, kebangsaan
Thank you. Let's continue to the next agenda. To begin this conference, we are pleased to invite Professor Sulistyo Saputro as Chairman of the International Conference on Science, Education and Technology 2022 to deliver the welcoming speech. Please welcome Professor Sulistyo Saputro.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for being here with us today. We are very pleased to welcome you in this annual conference, that is International Conference on Science, Education and Technology, ICOSETH 2022, held by Doctorate Program of Science Education, Faculty of Teacher Training and Education, Universitas Sebelas Maret. Before we get started, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you who generously help us make this event become a success. First, the Honorable Professor Sajidan, the Vice Rector for Planning, Partnership and Information Affairs of Sebelas Maret University, our Dean, Dr. Mardiana, our Vice Dean for Academic Research and Student Affairs, Professor Slamet Subiantoro, our Vice Dean for Human Resources, Finance, and Logistic Affairs, Dr. Dewi Kusumawardani, and also Vice Dean for the Planning, Partnership, and Information Affairs, Dr. Jono, and also our speakers, Assistant Professor Ong Yan Shu from Natural Science and Science Education, National Institute of Education, Singapore. Good morning, Dr. Ong. And then Dr. Muhammad Ikhwan bin Matsad from Faculty of Science and Mathematics, University Pendidikan Sultan Idris, Malaysia. Dr. Jose Manuel Digo Mentekon, Deputy Director of Department of the Mathematics, Statistics and Computation, University of Cantabria, Spain, and also Professor Sutarno, PhD, the Dean of Graduate School, Universitas Sebelas Maret, Indonesia, and also our distinguished participant, which I am proud of you. In today's conference, the theme of our ICOSETH 2022 is Shaping the Science Education of Tomorrow, Weaving Today's Technology, Literacy, and Social Culture. In this occasion, we are proud to be able to host it here by Zoom meeting, but I hope that this online conference will be value-adding to all, highly educative, contribute to the existing knowledge, pragmatic and memorable. Have a nice conference. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Professor Sulistyo Saputro, for the welcoming speech. It's now my deep pleasure to invite the Vice Rector for Planning, Partnership, Business and Information Affairs of Universitas Sebelas Maret, Professor Sajidan, to deliver the welcoming speech and to open the conference officially. Please welcome Professor Sajidan.
Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, Excellencies, all the speakers, Assistant Professor Ong Yan Shu from National Institute of Education, Singapore. Thank you for your presentation today. Good morning, Prof. Ong. Dr. Muhammad Ikhwan bin Matsad from University Pendidikan Sultan Idris, Malaysia. Thank you, Mr. Muhammad Ikhwan. Dr. Jose Manuel Diego Mentekon from University of Cantabria, Spain. and also Professor Sutarno from Universitas Maret. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Universitas Maret, UNS, it is a great pleasure to welcome you to the ICOSETH 2022, or the International Conference on Science, Education, and Technology. It is a great agenda of the Faculty of Teacher Training and Education, UNS. First, let me start the meeting with expression of gratitude. It gives me immense warmth and great pleasure to greet all of your presence and the interest of the entire committee. It gives me tremendous contentment to be presenting the welcome speech amongst the most esteemed personalities who have presented their rich knowledge in their respective fields. This event would have been impossible without the support of everyone present here. This conference is organized by the doctoral program in science education of the Faculty Teacher Training and Education. This postgraduate program has strong passionate in the research and science. Today's event is dedicated to share to knowledge and perspective among researchers and students in this field. ICOSETH 2020 aims to promote interaction among research and improve knowledge through sustainable innovation in the field of science education. We would like to make a better society through our finding and understanding, which may have important contribution for our further goals. As we are a part, it is our responsibility to act it as how it should be. The world today is facing many challenges. We must address the sustainability agenda to deliver improvement in efficiency and resource productivity. Together with the public and private sector, non-governmental and intergovernmental organizations, scientists, engineers, and are responsible to build a better life and safety for society through the application of knowledge to convert research into products and services without compromising the ability to future generation to cope with their need. This international conference is in line with the vision and mission of Universitas Maret. UNS has committed to contribute to the sustainable development, not only in the national level, but also in the regional and international environment, as we are fully aware that in today's globalized world, contribution of universities should be promoted to a wider spectrum. UNS has been recognized as an internationally reputable university. UNS has been ranked in the World University Ranking by TS and Times Higher Education. In addition, KStar has granted UNS with 4-star attribute according to their last assessment in this year. Recently, UNS is placed at 300 to 400 for the Time Higher Education Impact Ranking 2022. Moreover, the university is the only university in Indonesia included in the Time Higher Education Best Young University 2022 under 50 years old. In including, I wish you a very fruitful discussion, and again, thank you very much for participating in this conference. With say Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. the conference is official open. Thank you very much for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Professor Sajidan, for opening the conference officially. Next on schedule, we will have a photo session. So please to our honorable speakers and all of our participants to turn on your camera for a while. Okay, let's smile. Please wait for a moment. Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we will begin the first session of the plenary lecture that will be led by our moderator, Dr. Murni Ramli, from Biology Education Program, Faculty of Teacher Training and Education, Universitas Sebelas Maret, to carry this session. Please welcome Dr. Murni Ramli. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you, MC. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very delighted to be with you in the International Conference on Science, Education and Technology 2022. I hope all of you are doing well and ready for our first session. In the first session, we will have two speakers, Dr. Ong Yan Seo, from Department Natural Science and Science Education, National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. Good morning, Dr. Ong. And for the second speaker, we will have Dr. Muhammad Ikhwan bin Mat Saad from the Faculty of Science and Mathematics, University Pendidikan Sultan Idris, Malaysia. So both of our outstanding speakers will share their expertise about the current science education practices. And I believe that we will learn from both of them much. So I will divide this session into two. The first part will be Dr. Ong's presentation, and it will take about 45 minutes, including the Q&A session soon after her presentation. And the second part will be Dr. Saad's presentation. So let me introduce first the first speaker. I will share the CV of Dr. Ong. Okay, so Dr. Yang Xiao Ong is currently a lecturer of the Natural Science and Science Education of National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. She accomplished a PhD in a curriculum and instruction from the Pennsylvania State University, USA, and got the master degree of Science and Education at the University of Bristol, UK. And also, she has a current research on STEM education and also curriculum and practices of scientific practices at school. So today, Dr. Ong will share with us about the current scientific practices in Singapore. So I think it's better for us to learn from other perspectives, from other practices of other countries, especially Singapore, that we know Singapore currently are the top of Asian and also the world countries in PISA. So Dr. Ong, we will have about 45 minutes, 30 minutes to your presentation, and we will have 15 minutes. For all participants, if you have any question during her presentation, just put your questions in the chat box and I will read after that. Thank you very much. So I would like to invite Professor Ong, the platform of for you, please.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I hope everyone can see my slide that I'm sharing currently. Is that being shown? Thank you very much. All right. First of all, I would really like to thank the organizers of ICOSETH 2022 for inviting me to be a keynote speaker. I'm really happy and honored to have this opportunity to share on a topic that I am very passionate about, both as a researcher and as well as a teacher of future science teachers. So in National Institute of Education, I also partake in the training of pre-service physics teachers. And before that, I was also a physics teacher in the secondary and high school in Singapore. So without further ado, I'm going to begin my presentation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to note them down and park them in the chat box, and I'll try to get to them as soon as I can and when I notice them. So for many years, our current education system has really worked very well to produce well-trained workers for routine work, such as the kind of factory assembly lines that you see in the image that's portrayed on my slide right now. We tend to teach students the formal or final form of knowledge. So in science education, we tend to focus a lot on the scientific knowledge that has been established or around for hundreds of years. So I think many of us might remember that is typically what we have done in our secondary, in our high school, or even in our university education, where you have to kind of understand and reproduce a lot of the scientific knowledge, much like some of the expressions and the equations that you could see on the blackboard image that's on my slide right now. Students are often taught to follow fixed steps and procedures in order to complete a task, such as typically when we ask students to carry out an experiment to verify a relationship, students are given a very fixed procedure or protocol to follow. However, what we know, as was mentioned also in the opening speech, is that the kind of future that we expect to face, would be what we typically call a VUCA world, meaning it is going to be volatile, uncertain, complex, as well as ambiguous. And our current education model will not be able to prepare our young for this kind of a VUCA future. So we actually need to then ask ourselves, what model of education, specifically for science education, would we need in order to prepare our future generation for the world of tomorrow, which is also part of the theme for this conference. So here, in my presentation, I am going to propose that science education which engages students in scientific practices would be a possible approach to prepare our students for such a VUCA world. So first of all, we need to kind of understand what we mean when we say scientific practices. So I'm sure many of us have heard this term being used before. And so I present one definition that I think resonates or I agree with very much. And so this definition is from Kelly and Licona. And Kelly is actually Prof. Greg Kelly, who was at Pennsylvania State University and whom I actually had the chance to attend his classes. So he actually has done a lot of work on epistemic practices. And so epistemic practices are very similar to scientific practices, and I will explain a little bit more about that. So from Kelly and Licona, they define epistemic practices as the socially organized and interactionally accomplished ways that members of a group would propose, communicate, evaluate, and legitimize knowledge claims. What this actually means is that epistemic practices are interactional in nature, meaning these are practices that come about when people interact and act together through some kind of a common activity. epistemic practices are also contextual, meaning they are situated in certain kind of social practices and norms that are part of this group. Epistemic practices are also intertextual, meaning that it is communicated through a history of coherent discourses, signs, and symbols. So one very typical example of that in science education is that we teach students the equations, the formulas, and then the laws and the principles using different kinds of abstract symbols that have been kind of established in the discipline. So everybody knows what E equals to MC squared means, you know, without having to kind of explain in detail what each of the symbol means, so long as you have had some science education. So in a way, we are communicating through this system that has been established within the discipline. So that is part of what practices being intertextual would mean. It also could mean that in teaching science, we actually combine verbal, or what we say, the spoken ideas, as well as the written ideas. So especially when we're teaching science, we will refer students to what we might have taught in the last lesson, you know, what they might have learned in the previous year, and making connections in that sense also speaks to the intertextuality of epistemic practices. And finally, epistemic practices are consequential, meaning through epistemic practices, we legitimize the kind of knowledge. So what counts as justified and accepted peer-reviewed knowledge in science can also instantiate power and culture. So for example, you know, there are certain research teams or research groups that tend to have more power because, you know, they might do better research, or they may have a better kind of funding. And so the kind of knowledge that we accept as true or believable or trustworthy can be influenced by the group that can have the power, and also shaped by the kind of standards by which we might agree for something to be considered trustworthy or something that we can trust. So that is what it means by epistemic practices can be consequential. So the connection really between scientific practices and epistemic practices is that I would see it as scientific practices could be considered as the epistemic practices that scientists engage in order to construct scientific knowledge that that we can come to believe. And as I've put also a short explanation, so for those of us who might not be very certain of what epistemic means, you can think about epistemic as related to how we know what we know and why we should trust such knowledge. So in other words, what are the criteria or standards by which we can judge something to be true? So how would you know something to be true? Is it because you read it from a textbook? Is it because you read it in the news? Is it because it's something that you personally have experienced and so you believe it to be true? Is it because it is something that you have observed? You know, you are a witness to something that happened and thus you believe it to be true. So in science, I would say that two standards are very common. So in science knowledge, we tend to think that we need to consider whether the knowledge is reliable and whether it is valid. Of course, there are many other standards or epistemic criteria that we use in science to judge why and how we should trust such knowledge. But these reliability and validity are two very common standards indeed. And so I would like to propose or claim that understanding scientific practices would help students to develop critical and creative thinking, as well as scientific literacy, in order for them to become better citizens. How does that happen? Because I think when students understand why and how we should trust certain kind of knowledge, such as scientific knowledge, it helps them to decide if and why they should trust some of the claims that are being put forward, and therefore help them to make personal decisions. For individuals who might be within a family or a community, they could help to make decisions for the family or for the community. For others who might have more power and authority, in various organizations or as leaders of various communities, they can also then be better informed to help make decisions that can impact a larger group of people. And so I argue that helping students to understand scientific practices, or community, they could help to make decisions. So let me repeat that. So I think that if we can help students to understand scientific practices, such as how is it that we can come to trust the scientific knowledge that's being produced, it can help them to be more critical in terms of decision making. So as was introduced, the main part of my sharing today, I will be focusing on the efforts that have been made in Singapore towards developing students' scientific practices. And so I am going to touch on 3 areas of curriculum, instruction, and assessment, which are the pillar of any education system, really. So I will share very briefly some of the curriculum changes that is being implemented in Singapore that is relevant to scientific practices. I will also share on some recent research efforts that myself and my research team has put in to develop integrative activities for instruction in lower secondary science, and also to highlight some of the recent work we have done in coming up with a scientific practices survey in order to decide or to determine how good students are currently, and also perhaps after some intervention or after instruction, how good the students would be in terms of demonstrating scientific practices. All right, so first up, I'm going to share with you some of the recent changes in the Singapore Science Education Framework. So this is very recent. It was formally introduced, I would say, to the lower secondary science curriculum. So that would be grade 7 and 8 equivalent in 2021. So just last year it was launched. And the goal of this new framework is to help develop students' 21st century competencies through an integration of core ideas in the sciences, practices of science, as well as inculcating students' values, ethics, as well as attitudes. So this is the graphic representation of the practices of science aspect that has been introduced in the science education curriculum in Singapore. So at the center of it all, the practices of science is represented by a triangle with 3 sides. And so these 3 sides feature the 3 different components of practices of science that the Ministry of Education in Singapore envisioned. So on the left, you see the demonstrating ways of thinking and doing science. And these are different 8 different practices, so to speak, in the general science education literature. Some of you will find it very familiar. Indeed, it is it resembles, or it is very similar to the scientific and engineering practices that has been highlighted in the USA Next Generation Science Standards. So here, I've highlighted where the different components of the practices of science maps onto or correlates to various aspects in the Next Generation Science Standards. So as I mentioned, demonstrating ways of thinking and doing in the Singapore version corresponds to the scientific and engineering practices in the Next Generation Science Standards in the US version, although there are some slight differences. But you can see that these 8 practices actually can be categorized according to the 3 spheres of scientific activity that Jonathan Osborne, who is also a very well-known science education researcher, has put forward. So we think about scientific activities, or the 3 spheres of scientific activity as belonging to engaging in investigating, in evaluating and reasoning, as well as developing explanations. So in addition to the ways of thinking and doing science, practices of science in the Singapore version of the framework also includes understanding the nature of science on the right-hand side, and as well as making connections to science, technology, society, and the environment. Okay, so again, those of you who might be familiar with the next generation science standards will find similarities to the various connections of nature of science, as well as connections to engineering, technology, and applications of science that are named in the next generation science standards. So currently, this particular framework is also making its way into the upper secondary science syllabus, which will be implemented starting from 2023. So we are really excited to see how all of these would take place in these secondary schools. And hopefully, if I have a chance, I'll be able to update everyone on the progress. So that was my very short introduction of the science education framework in Singapore in light of the updates to the practices of science aspect. So right now, I'm going to spend some time going through an example of an integrative activity that my research team has developed. So a very quick introduction to what are integrative activities. So these are activities that were originally also designed by the curriculum planning officers in the Ministry of Education, Singapore. And these were designed with the intention to provide students with more extended or longer and more intense learning experiences of up to 2 hours or beyond. And they were intended for lower secondary science students, as I had mentioned, which would be the 7th and 8th grades equivalent. So these are students who are 13 to 14 years old. And each integrative activity was intended to be conducted at the beginning or end of a science theme. So in the lower secondary science syllabus in Singapore, students are taught the science topics according to 4 different themes, namely diversity, models, interactions, and systems. So the approach is to try to incorporate a more integrative way of teaching science to students so that they can see science as a holistic kind of a discipline, rather than think about science as physics, chemistry, and biology. So this is the approach that is taken at the lower secondary science, and it is a continuation from the primary science syllabus, which also features a more thematic approach. And so for each of the integrative activity, the activity would target different kinds of core ideas within a theme. They would target some of the ways of thinking and doing science, which would be what most of the science educators would call scientific practices, as well as nature of science and making connections to science, technology, society, and the environment. So as I mentioned, these integrative activities were originally developed by the curriculum planning officers in the Ministry of Education. However, we have, as a research team, we have also decided to take on the task of designing more integrative activities, because currently the version from the Ministry of Education is such that there's only one integrative activity for every theme, because developing such activities takes a lot of effort. So as a research project, we took on the task of designing more integrative activities and testing them out in schools. And so right now we are at the end stage of our project. We have already trialed out most of our integrative activities in schools, and we are still though in the process of collecting more data because we are trying to see how these sets of activities would work in a variety of school settings. So in the interest of time, I will share with you one of the activity that we had designed. So this is fairly original, although some of you might have seen similar versions online. So a similar version would be, I think they call it what's under the board, or what's the hidden object, or what's the mystery object. So the setup is really simple. You place a small but heavy object in the center, and on a flat surface or flat floor, and you place a board that's fairly large above it, so that this object is hidden from view. So it's a hidden object. On the board, you mark out the 4 sides with numbers. So this forms like a kind of coordinate system, so that students can actually use the coordinate system to make a note the direction in which the marbles will roll. So let me just go through the task first. So the task is such that the task was presented to students that scientists think that there are some circular objects that are hidden from view under a particular board. And the student's task is to identify the position, or find out where are the positions of these hidden objects. And all they are provided would be marbles. So for those of us who are science trained, or like if you still remember some of the physics and the chemistry background, you might start to think that this looks a lot like the Rutherford's gold foil experiment, and indeed that is modeled after that experiment. Of course, there are a lot of differences, but this is a very simplified model of the Rutherford's gold foil experiment, which helped to decide or determine the location of the positive charges in an atom. And it also highlights an important way of doing measurement, which is indirect measurement in science. Indirect because students cannot observe where or see the location of these hidden objects directly, so they have to use some indirect means. In this case, students have to infer the position of the hidden object through the trajectory or the pathways that a rolled marble would make as you roll the marble across the floor underneath the board. So let's take a look at some of the photos that shows how the students achieve this. So on the left-hand side, I have a photo of a simplified or smaller version of the board. So what we notice is that, so for some schools, they prefer students to work in pairs rather than in a large class. So the previous slide where I showed you, I would have had the students work on a large board, so that maybe half of the class or 1/4 of the class, so maybe around 8 to 10 students, could crowd around the board and then roll marbles to try to figure out the pathways of the marbles by noticing the coordinates where the marbles roll into and out of the board. So, but because of the COVID situation, some schools actually prefer to work in pairs, so that it's a smaller number of people that are working on the each of these boards. So they have a mini version of the board, and so on the left-hand side, you see students trying to make sure that they roll the marbles in a straight line. So they are using the ruler to provide like to channel the movement of the marbles. And on the right-hand side, is actually how the teacher would facilitate the discussion by calling on students to indicate what was the position or what's the coordinate where the marble rolled into the board and out of the board, and using that information to try to then infer what is the pathway taken by individual marbles that were rolled. And from there, they can then try to make some inferences about where collision occurred, because when a rolled marble makes a collision with a hidden object, then chances are the path of the marble will be deflected, and so it'll exit from a point that is not directly across from the entry point. So on the right-hand side, you see how the teacher would facilitate discussion to come up with what we will call an explanatory model for the position of the object that's hidden under the board. So this would be an example of an integrative activity that would be conducted over 2 hours. So it would include having students or leading the students to discuss and plan what would be their strategy. In other words, would they prefer to roll the marbles in turn, so they would go according to the coordinate system? Would they roll the marbles randomly? How fast should they roll the marble? Because if you roll it too slow and it gets so-called stuck in the middle of the board, that information is kind of lost. So students need to understand and be aware of all the challenges or the details that they need to go into planning how they would actually carry out this investigation. And of course, time needs to be spent on analyzing and interpreting the data in order for them to conclude where is the most likely position of the hidden object under the board. So here I show a map of the various ways of thinking and doing science or scientific practices that were targeted by this particular integrative activity. So the WOTDs that are in black are the ones that are targeted. The ones with words in gray, they are the ones that we did not target or did not intend for this particular integrative activity. Although it is also possible to highlight some of these other ways of thinking and doing science if you actually extend the activity to a greater extent. So what we found, so here I've indicated what we found in terms of who was doing most of the work, all right? Not really surprising, but a little disappointing, I would say, was that most of the time the students were focused on conducting the experiments. So they were doing the rolling, as you notice, and taking note of the coordinates for the rolled marbles. And the teacher did most of the work in deciding how, or telling students how the investigation should be designed. So the teacher would tell the students, oh, we need to roll the marble quickly. So, we should roll them, from in a systematic way. We start with the lower coordinate numbers and we progress up to the higher coordinate numbers. And the teacher was mostly involved in analyzing and interpreting the data. This was expected because this kind of data is very novel to the students. Students do not usually, at least in Singapore, students do not have opportunities really to analyze data that is of this nature. Very often they would be doing measurements, of swinging pendulums, taking temperatures, of using the thermometer. So they are more used to that kind of data, whereas positions of rolled marbles and then inferring pathways, this is not something that students are used to. And so we kind of expected that the teacher would have to do or take on most of the role of analyzing and interpreting data. But I think that the teacher also then went on to be the person in charge of evaluating and defending ideas with evidence. So the teacher was the main person that kind of tried to argue for where is the position of the hidden object. And also, of course, the teacher was facilitating or mostly in charge of trying to help students understand the connection between this activity as well as the Rutherford experiment. So I think overall, we felt that the activity was overly teacher directed. And of course, we would like it if, subsequently we can encourage the teachers to give students more authority to take part or contribute towards the other targeted practices. So very quickly, some of the preliminary findings, some of which I've already mentioned. So I think what we saw worked very well was that students were very engaged. They really enjoyed the activities. There was a lot of communication and discussion amongst the students. They also commented that many of our integrative activities, so not just this one that I've shared, but many other ones, were quite different from their usual science practical lessons. So what we think students mean when they say different is that they don't have to follow very strict instructions to, do the very standard kind of practical work. I think they enjoyed the integrative activities because they had a lot of opportunities to converse with their peers and to discuss the work. Because bear in mind, when we were doing this research, it was just after the really peak period of COVID. So during COVID times, students did not have any chance to talk to their peers at all. So I think they were really happy that they had a chance to do that in these activities. And I think what is heartening is that teachers also saw value in these activities. But the problems were as what I had highlighted. So mainly the teachers were involved in the other targeted scientific practices. And one thing we noticed that is interesting is that teachers often thought that science inquiry would end after the students have completed the hands-on. So teachers tend to think that, oh, discussing where the location of the hidden object, that's different from inquiry. You know, that's the discussion. And that not only happened for this integrative activity, it happened for other activities, integrative activities we had observed as well. And so that is something that we feel we need to try to address, because scientific inquiry is not just about the investigating. It is also about reasoning and evaluating the evidence, as well as proposing the solution or proposing the explanation or the scientific model for why, you know, you see certain things that you see. Finally, one other interesting observation we had, not directly related to this particular IA, but we had another integrative activity that was more open-ended. The teachers tended to focus on either reaching the correct answer that is expected, or they felt that all answers were equally good. And I think that last point is a little bit problematic, especially in light of scientific problems. While it is true that there could be many different scientific explanations that could be competing, so meaning there could be alternative explanations using scientific knowledge that are equally good, but there will always be possible ways to determine which explanation is a better one. And I think that this is the aspect that we need to improve upon in terms of communicating with teachers, because not all answers are equal or as good. There are different criteria. So like what I mentioned previously about epistemic criteria. There are epistemic criteria we can use to determine which scientific explanation or answer could be better compared to others. And so in terms of the challenges or future work, this is definitely one area that we would like to focus on and improve upon in order for students and teachers to gain a better understanding of these scientific practices. So I know that I have very little time left, but I still want to be able to quickly introduce to everyone. So in terms of the, I've mentioned so far, curriculum, as well as instructional practices that in terms of the integrative activities that we have highlighted. And finally, the last piece of the curriculum puzzle really is to look at a scientific practices survey or a kind of assessment instrument. So I will share very briefly how we went about developing this particular instrument. So we started off by thinking about what would be the various scientific practices we want to target. And of course, being ambitious, we want to target all of these. So we had to then map out what would be the different items in our survey instrument that would map onto the various scientific practices. So here you see a distribution map of the items in our instrument that maps onto the various scientific practices. We did not want to have many questions because already just with the limited number of questions we have, it would have taken students 45 minutes to complete the instrument, because right now our instrument features open-ended response questions. So not multiple choice. Subsequently, when I think we are more confident with the instrument, then redeveloping it into a multiple choice items would definitely make it more possible to include more items for students to complete. But right now it's an open-ended question. So let me quickly show you the question that we have. So this is the start of one of our question, and it is to say that, okay, so student Janice saw some pond skaters in the school garden, and she wants to investigate how or why is it that pond skaters can kind of float on the water. So she tried to investigate if spreading the weight over a large area helps something to float. And so she came up with the hypothesis that objects with larger surface area will float more often than objects of the same mass with smaller surface area. And in order to test out her hypothesis, she used wires made into circles of different sizes to model the pond skaters. So here you see how she had created 10 circles. So there are 2 circles of the same sizes each. And she conducted the experiment by putting the circles in a tray of water and then just observe whether the circles float or sink. And this is the data she got. The question we asked the students is, based on the data, how many more times should Janice repeat her investigation? Okay, and then students were supposed to select the response that they think is appropriate. In the interest of time, I will not poll everyone. That was my original intention, to see what everyone might think. So I will just quickly show you how we analyzed the responses. So we actually thought that if the response was as many times as possible or none of the above, but with elaboration, those would be appropriate responses. Because definitely if students chose response A, Janice does not need to repeat. I think the student does not realize that some of the data set are problematic because there is no clear trend in terms of whether particular size of a circle was float or sink. And what was really interesting, though, was that many students chose to repeat the experiment one more time so that they can get 3 sets of data. So that was something that was really interesting for us, because we think that that is an indication that the student was really doing school science. Because I don't know if it's the same practice where you are from, but in Singapore, many teachers tell the students to make sure that they have 3 sets of data whenever they do a science experiment. But the teacher does not explain why you need 3 sets of data. And in science, there is no reason why you need 3 sets of data. You need to have sufficient data such that they are consistent and reliable. So meaning, once you are able to get enough data sets that you can that is consistent and reliable, you don't have to keep repeating unless you want to, to improve the statistical measures and so on and so forth. But it was really interesting for us to see that students actually thought they needed 3 sets of data. So, and that is where I summarize that kind of response here, where students needed 3 sets of data. What is also very disturbing and yet interesting was that we also had students saying, so Janice should actually find an average, without recognizing that you cannot average a float and a sink result. And again, that indicates to us that students were thinking about doing a lot of science practical work that they typically do in science, where the teacher might say, okay, so you have 3 sets of data, you will just average the results so that, that would be the result that you use to draw conclusions. And so we think that that's probably what students were doing. They were using their previous practices for a certain kind of investigations, and using that in this particular investigation or this problem, which would not apply. So I think that that speaks to us that there is still a lot of room for improvement in terms of students' scientific practices. I also do want to highlight, though, that when we tested this, the results that I'm sharing with you right now, the students have not experienced any intervention on scientific practices. So we just wanted to pilot test our survey instrument to find out what students would generally be, which level they would generally be in terms of their scientific practices. So with that, I just want to summarize and end my segment by saying that so after sharing in terms of the efforts made by in Singapore in terms of trying to develop students' scientific practices, I hope that I have kind of convinced or at least demonstrated that the possibility of using or focusing science education on scientific practices as a possible model for science education to help prepare our students for the VUCA world of tomorrow. And of course, I have to say that because the future is uncertain, we cannot be sure that our education model will definitely work. But I do strongly believe that a science education model that includes scientific practices or practices of science would have a better chance of success than our current model that I had showed at the beginning of my sharing in terms of a model that focuses on learning just the final form scientific knowledge. I think that if we start to introduce more scientific practices in our science education model, we would have a better chance of better preparing our future generation for a very VUCA world of tomorrow. And with that, I would like to also invite all the conference participants to really think about what other science education models do you think would be beneficial for helping our students to be prepared for a better tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ong. It's really interesting presentation about scientific practices currently run by Professor Ong and also Professor Lee Eugene and research team doing for improving the quality of science practices in Singapore. So I would like to invite participants to ask questions if you have by raising your hand if you want to ask directly or just put your question in the chat box. But before that, while waiting them, I would like to ask first, use my chance to ask first. You mentioned about the integrated team that you applied for the seventh grade and also 8th grades. As I see in your presentation slide, the theme is about diversity, models, interaction, and also system.
Yes.
So it means I just want to know, because in our curriculum in Indonesia, we do not have those kind of themes in our science curriculum. So it means that you integrated between physics, biology, chemistry into one theme, and then introduce to the students one model to or integrated activity to learn that.
Yes,
so,
that is correct.
Yeah. So is it also for elementary school and also high school curriculum, or only for the junior high?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So in the primary science curriculum, we also go by a thematic approach. So there are various themes within the primary science syllabus. So and some of these themes are merged at the lower secondary into the 4 themes that I had shared. So you are exactly correct. What we mean by a theme will be, so for example, in the theme of interactions, students will learn about energy and energy transfer as the physical science component of the interactions. And then they will also be introduced to topics in ecosystems and interactions, the kinds of relationships between organisms and the abiotic factors and biotic factors for the biological sciences. So what is done is that the different topics that traditionally belong to biology, chemistry, and physics are pulled together and then categorize together within each theme. So when students learn about the theme of interactions, they will start with maybe energy, learning about energy transfer, and then they will proceed to learn about interactions amongst different organisms as well as with the environment. And collectively, when the teacher introduces these individual topics within the theme, the teacher will make connections back to the big ideas that are associated with the theme. And of course, they would accumulate, so they end with the integrative activity that attempts to also pull together either some of the core ideas or the conceptual knowledge that they learn within the theme, as well as the different aspects of practices of science that would be most appropriate for that particular integrative activity. Yes.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you. Okay, so let's move to the next question. I still have some question because it's really, really interesting, your research. The next question is about the scientific practices. In Indonesia, we use the AAA scientific process skills, which consists of two basic scientific process skill and also the integrated scientific process skill. But I see in your presentation that you make it simple. I mean, it's only consists of investigating, evaluating, and reasoning. And also the last one is developing explanation and solution. So that's really interesting because when I introduce the scientific process skills to the schools, I mean, the teaching and learning processes, I think there are some difficulties of teachers to measure and also to practice all the basic scientific process skills and also integrated scientific process skills. So maybe there are some reason why you make it simplify the scientific process skills that will be introduced to the students and teachers in Singapore.
All right, thank you very much for noticing that. I'm really glad. So I need to clarify that in the Ministry of Education's version, as I had shown, they had divided into 8 different practices. But they were also categorized under the 3 spheres of scientific activity. In our work, I think we emphasize the 3 spheres. And the reason is because it is a more defensible way of thinking about the overall scientific activity. And one thing, of course, that we also try to highlight to the teachers is that it doesn't mean you have to proceed in this way. It doesn't mean that you only start with investigating and then you have to do the evaluating and reasoning. And finally, you construct the explanation. Science doesn't work that way. For those of us who have done science research, you probably know, typically in a science lab, you might start with a hypothesis that is somewhat like an explanation or a model. You have something in mind. You think that, oh, maybe it is because of these reasons, so I think these factors would be important. And then based on your initial hypothesis, which would include some form of explanation, you would then propose an investigation that would help you to test and verify your hypothesis. So, it doesn't necessarily mean that all scientific inquiry must start with the investigation kind of activity. So unfortunately, though, because of visual display, you tend to display them in a linear way. So we try to have teachers not think in a linear fashion, but think of it as just these are the different kinds of activities we want our students to have the opportunities to engage in. So rightfully so, that's why part of the reason why we choose to at least in our research, we focus on these 3, because I think that they are firstly easy to remember. People remember 3 items are easier to remember than 8 items. So and it is really the spirit behind what each of these involve that's really important than the very specific kind of practices that each one encompasses. So I think that we'll be really heartened if teachers can remember that in their teaching and learning, they will try to incorporate activities or opportunities for students to think about investigating, think about reasoning and evaluating with evidence, as well as think about constructing explanations. So that is, I would say, the main reason why we focus on these 3.
Yeah, thank you very much. So again, I would like to invite the participants. We still have 7 minutes for asking the question to Dr. Ong. Does anybody want to ask question? Oh, okay. Mr. Ari, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Murni, for the opportunities. And I would like to say thank you very much, Professor Ang, to your insightful presentation. And I'm interested to your model for practices of science or POS. Did you synthesize the 3 steps of scientific activities by Osborne and the US and Next Generation Science Standard, and then relating science, technology, and society and environment? That is the first question. And the other question is, could you please tell to us how you developing the learning instruction and how student response, such as learning in POS? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Let me try to see if I got the question correct. So I think in the first question, you were asking about the practices of science framework. So that's the one with the triangle at the center, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is actually developed by the Ministry of Education Singapore. So that was not developed by our research team. I'm just sharing what has been developed. But based on my understanding and my communication with the curriculum planning officers, indeed, they also they actually referenced Osborne's work on the 3 scientific activity spheres. That was also part of the so the Osborne's 3 spheres of scientific activity was actually referenced in a framework for K-12 science education. This is a report that was actually put together and it was a precursor to the next generation science standards. So in a way, there is a history to it. So they did consider the 3 spheres of scientific activities. And then later on, based on expert recommendations, I think in the US, they came up with like a set of 8 scientific and engineering practices. So for the Singapore Ministry of Education, they considered these. I think they also looked at some other countries' curriculum framework, but I think that currently, at least also based on my understanding, I think the most well-developed framework for scientific practices would be the next generation science standards, because they spell out explicitly what each of the practices mean, and they also highlight what would be the expected performance for students at different grade levels. So it is very well articulated. And so I think that's also part of the reason why when the Ministry of Education in Singapore wanted to propose this new framework with including practices of science, they actually definitely considered the next generation science standards. However, having said that, there were 2 areas that were modified. So one very significant area is that in the Singapore version, we did not include mathematical and computational thinking. So that was, I think, intentionally not included because, so this is my opinion, and based on my interaction with the officers, I think that it would have been more appropriate for the mathematical curriculum rather than the science curriculum. So that was a decision they made not to include it. Whereas in next generation science standards in the US, they felt it was important enough. And I think also part of the reason is that the idea was that students in the USA are not very good in math and computational thinking. So they felt they need to emphasize that in the science curriculum as well. Yeah, so they included that. So we did not include that in the Singapore version. Instead, we included one practice on making informed decisions. And it would not typically appear as a scientific practice. Definitely, I would argue that most science education researchers would not necessarily consider that as part of scientific practice, making informed decisions. Being responsible and making informed decisions would not be part of a scientific practice, but it would be an outcome. That would be a desired outcome that you want students to be able to make informed decisions, take responsibility for actions if they are scientifically literate. But I think for the Singapore version, they decided to include it in because they felt it was sufficiently important that they want to emphasize it. So a lot of various decisions are made at the policy level, right, in terms of what you might select or include as part of practices. Again, even the current model that be it in the next generation science standards or in the Singapore's science education framework in terms of what counts as scientific practices, I don't think that there is a standard correct answer. But I think there is definitely a more justifiable answer, as what I've also tried to highlight in my presentation. And I think that is part of the challenge, most certainly, for anyone that is developing a curriculum. So we will have to think very carefully about what we think would be the best range of practices to include and why would we want to include these range of practices. So I hope that answers the first question. Okay, and then the second question, I think you were asking about the implementation of the integrative activities. So I did not have the chance to pull out some of the students' responses, but at least for research purpose, what we did was we had the worksheet for students for the integrative activities. So students had to report on certain decisions that they have made. So for example, with the atomic model activity, students had to report on maybe things like, okay, why did they choose to ignore certain data sets? And part of the reason could be because, when they were rolling the marble actually hit something that was at the side pillar to support the board, or, the marble was not rolled in a straight direction, and so on and so forth. So students were supposed to explain why they didn't include certain data set when they were trying to infer the position of the hidden object. So based on how students responded, we would then be able to infer whether students understood the practice of analyzing and interpreting data. or not. So that would be one level of analysis that we do. So based on what students write, we then make decisions about whether what the students have written indicates that they understood and have demonstrated the practice, or that they have not really understood the practice. During the research, we also video recorded the students' interactions. So we look at how the students talk about it. And I think that's actually very important information. Unfortunately, due to the COVID situation, everyone was wearing a mask. So that was one of the challenges we realized as well for doing classroom research, because even though we recorded the lesson, students' voices were still very muffled through the mask. So it was difficult for us to figure out what they were talking about. But, that would have been a typical source of data for us to decide whether the students understood what's happening, because our research viewpoint is that a lot of these practices are demonstrated when they are happening in action. So we want to see students in action and then make inferences about their performance as they are engaged in these practices. Yeah. And then of course, finally, for our research, we also had focus group discussions. We asked the students, so what did you think about the activity? So that was how we knew that students enjoyed the activity. We also asked the students, do they think that they were acting like a scientist? Why or why not? So interestingly, most students who were doing the atomic model activity when they were just rolling marbles, they didn't think they were doing science because they were just rolling marbles. Yeah. So it was interesting information for us as well, because it helps us to get a sense of what students typically think scientists do, and whether they think that what they are doing in their regular science lessons was similar or different than what scientists do, and then compared to what they were doing in these integrative activities. Then finally, we came up with the survey instrument. Currently, as I mentioned, they are open-ended questions, so I only had a chance to show one question, but there's a series of questions within within a survey. And so again, we make judgment on based on the students' responses. We think whether the student is showing a high level performance in that particular practice, or whether the students is still needs room for improvement in terms of their particular area of practice. And so right now, the survey instrument has been tested with one school. We are hoping to get more schools to try out the survey instrument. And then because we need to make sure the instrument is reliable. Right now, we think it is valid, but we need to make sure that it is reliable as well. And if anyone is really interested to find out more about the survey instrument or about our integrative activities, I think please feel free to send an email to me. I think hopefully my email will be able to be shared through the organizers.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ong. We finally come to the end of the time of your session. So I really would like to thank for the awesome presentation. I think we still have need you in the future, so we will invite you again to share your research and also the interesting things about the interactive activities. Thank you very much. And there is one question in the chat box, but I have to move to another session. But if you have time, just please write down in the chat box your response about that question.
Okay, sure, I will. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And give applause for Dr. Ong. Okay, thank you very much. I know that you will have other event in your university, so just take your time to do another activity. Have a nice day. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, so let's move to the next session. I will invite Dr. Muhammad Ikhwan Ahmad bin Saad. Hello, Dr. Ikhwan, Dr. Saad. Assalamualaikum.
Hello, assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Listen to my voice.
Yes, it's clear. So before you presenting your paper, I would like to introduce first your curriculum vitae. So Dr. Muhammad Ikhwan bin Saad is a lecturer from the Faculty of Science and Mathematics, University Pendidikan Sultan Idris, Tanjung Maling Perak, Malaysia, and his expertise in measurement education, biology education, policy education, development index, model and module. So Dr. Saad will share with us about the assessment, one of the important elements on science practices in the classroom and also in the outside the classroom. So Dr. Saad, you also have about 45 minutes, including the Q&A session and 30 minutes for presentation. So I will give the platform, the forum to you. Please, Dr. Ikhwan.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning, Professor, Associate Professor, Doctor, and ladies and gentlemen, Universitas Sebelas Maret. Thank you to the narrator, Dr. Murni. I am very proud and honored to be invited to share knowledge with the student here. As introduced by the moderator just now, my area of expertise in measurement of education in science and biology, as well as in policy education. Before that, I'm an experienced teacher in science and biology at the primary and secondary school almost 25 years. Before I'm going to the lecture in the University Pendidikan Sultan Idris. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we back to our topic that we want to discuss and share is about the assessment. As the moderator said, assessment is an important part of the science education. Let's say how to measure our student development and achievement holistically in science subject. All right. Okay. Before we go through our lecture or our keynote speaker, let's know what is an assessment first. Okay, assessment is the root of the word from the Latin that means assidere, to sit beside. That means all good education know that assessment is a critical component of any successful learning and teaching experience. They also recognize that assessment is one of the main part of the job of teaching. Every teacher or become teacher, you should know what is a measurement first. When we sit beside our student, we try to look at our student. We learn how we want to measure or we want to assess our student achievement, and look at them. What are the situation? What are the tasks? What are the standard that we want to measure them? So that is the assessment meaning. Okay. Okay. Assessment defined based on the previous researcher is first is an ongoing process which aims at understanding and improving student learning. This is from Angelo, 1995. And the second, a process of gathering about pupils' responses or student responses to an educational task. And third, hence the primary aim of assessment should be monitor improvement of student learning, provide feedback about student, to inform future action of both learner and teachers, and to report student progress. That is the assessment defined. Yeah? Okay. From the past researcher, we can define assessment as what? From the Malaysian boarding, for the Malaysian education, assessment is defined is the process of obtaining information with using various methods and approaches, whether formative, summative, formal, and informal, internal or external, to obtain evidence that can be considered and subsequently make judgment about an education product. That is the assessment. The keyword of the assessment is the process, evidence, judgment, and the product. What's the meaning of the process? Okay, the meaning of the process is a sequence or step, orderly action or operation and direct use for achieve the desired result. This is a process. We know the step, we plan the step, and we take the action to use what we want to achieve to our student when they learn the science subject. This is the process. And then we need, sorry, our internet is not stable. Okay, when the process is done, we need the information is evidence. What are the evidence can describe our student performance? It's like the result, it's like our observation, it's like the question and answer in teaching and learning. That is the evidence we need. And the teacher need the judgment, the process consideration of achievement. When the student give the answers, the teachers try to judge what the answers can aim the learning outcome or not, can aim the standard learning outcome or not. That is the judgment. And the last one is the product. The product is not the student is graduated. No, the product is a contact in education, is the knowledge, the skill, and the value acquired by student after going through the education process. This is a product. It's not the graduate of the student. The graduate of student is first, but the graduate of our student is the product if they have the knowledge, skill, and value. That is the assessment defined by the Malaysian as a Malaysian perhaps. Right? Okay. Now let's go to the importance of assessment. Why is assessment is a very important in our curriculum, especially science curriculum? Okay. First, to find out what the student know. As we know, the product is about the knowledge. So the importance of assessment is to find what the student know, the knowledge. And second, to find out what the student can do and how well they can do. That is can do, that means it's by the skills, how we assess the skill. And then to find out how students go about task of doing their work, the process, like the first keynote asked, how the process, the activities, the practices of the science. That is how to find out the student of doing their work. And the last one, to find out how students feel about their work. The question, the first keynote, the audience asked the keynote, the first keynote, how about they feel, the student feel? Yes. The importance of assessment, we should know how to find out the student feel. Is it the motivation, the interest, the effort? The teachers should be know if we give our student the activities, we should know, we should measure how they feel. They feel motivated, they feel interest, or they feel bad. So our teachers is not what we call it's not suka-suka untuk for the activities, but the activities should be planned and follow the step from the science investigation, for the example. Okay, this is important of assessment. And then, what is student assessment for? Okay, what is a student assessment for? After we know the importance of the assessment, we should know what is student assessment for. For what? For what? For the teachers, the assessment student is for us to design and modify the program to better promote learning and student success. Teachers should have the idea or creative to design and modify the tasks or the programs to achieve the student learning outcome. And then to provide the definition and benchmark for our student abilities. We know every student have a different abilities and a different benchmark. When we try to modify the program, we try to provide what is the benchmark of our student capability that can be enable us to act more coherently and effectively to promote student learning. That is the what is the student assessment for. And then to provide feedback. This is very important, to provide feedback. Assessment, when we try to plan the program to the achievement of the student, and we can provide so as to help them better plan and execute their educational program. Of course, for our student and for us to provide improved feedback for our teaching as well as. That is the what is a student assessment for. And then, okay, all assessment as their aims for the subject, science subject, for the mathematics subject, for the biology, for the another subject. But the aim of a science subject or the general aims of assessment is to tell us what the student needs to learn. This is the aim of an assessment. Tell us what are the student needs to learn. We refer to our curriculum, we design to the program, to the activities, and we can get what are the student need to learn, and then tell us how well the student is doing as work progresses, and then tell us how well the student did at the end of the task. This is the aim of the assessment. Then, okay, then what can be assessed? What we can assess from our student? Of course, the main part can be assessed of our student is learning. Learning, in other words, we can define that first, content knowledge. Second, ability to apply the content knowledge itself. And then the skills, the attitudes, and the last one is the performances. That is what the learning can be assessed. I repeat again, the content knowledge itself, how to apply the content knowledge, the skill, the attitudes, and the performance. All of them can measure about the cognitive, about the psychomotor, and about the attitude or noble or disposition. That is the learning can be assessed. This is the general ways. After that, we will look what is the assessment in science subject in Malaysian. This is the general of the assessment. Okay. Then, okay, how do we assess? It's a lot of tools that we can assess. But how do we assess? In general, we assess our student to achieve of their learning outcome of standard learning is by diagnostic assessment. It's done before teaching. Before teaching, we try to look our previous knowledge or experience or the skill from our student. We give the some tasks and try to diagnose them. That is a diagnostic assessment. And then during the teaching and learning, we try to give our student the formative assessment. And then at the last of our teaching, at the last of the semester, end of the year, we give the summative assessment. That is the how do we assess. That means the assessment to our student is continuous from before, during, and after. That is the how do we assess. All right. Okay, this is a table about the diagnostic, formative, and summative assessment. The type of assessment, look at the diagnostic. What we said is a looking back, preparing forward. Looking back, what is the previous knowledge of our student? What is the what is the what is a student have? What is a student knowledge? That is a diagnostic. We give the assessment, and then diagnostic and formative assessment is a looking back and preparing forward. Feedback and feeding forward. That is the how we improve our student knowledge after we know the level of our student, and at the end we feeding back, providing a snapshot of summative. We give the grade, we give the level of our student at the end of our lesson. That is the assessment type. And every assessment type, we have the objective and outcome. For the diagnostic assessment, they have a, we call it assessment for learning. Assessment for learning. And the same way, diagnostic and formative assessment, we have assessment as learning. And at the end of the assessment, summative assessment, we have the assessment of learning. So we have three types of objective and outcome assessment: assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning. All of the assessment we can put at the authentic assessment. Authentic assessment. Okay, what is assessment for learning? Okay, as shown at the table, assessment for learning is ascertaining students' prior knowledge, perception, and misconception, monitoring student learning progress, and informing teaching practice and curriculum planning in order to support students' future learning and understanding. That is an assessment for learning. What we do, the diagnostic assessment time. And then before the student learning, we try to give this assessment. And then assessment as learning is focusing on the constructive feedback from the to self-assess and reflect on their learning to improve their future learning and understanding. That is during teaching. We can assess our student from the activities, from the question and answers, from the observing, from the task, from the grouping activities. It's a very kind of task we can the teachers can measure to our student during the activities. And the last one is the assessment of learning, making judgment. The teachers are making the judgment about what the student has learned in relation to the teaching and learning goals. Should be comprehensive and reflect their learning growth over the time period being assessed. Okay, that is the assessment of learning for the summative assessment. This what we call this is the authentic assessment. Yeah, authentic assessment. Authentic assessment is a different with the traditional assessment. If the traditional assessment is a copy, is a pencil and paper, but the authentic assessment is a variety of assessment we can look at our students. All right. And then, okay, what alternative names for the authentic assessment? Some previous research said the authentic assessment is one. So the authentic assessment, we can put the part of the authentic assessment is a performance assessment, alternative assessment, and direct assessment. Performance assessment is like a test. Alternative assessment is a like of test, but it's a practice test. For Malaysia, alternative assessment is used to special needs education. Special need education, because our special need education student, they did not have the what we call the formative or for summative assessment, but we give them the alternative assessment based on the practices, what they're doing, their portfolio, their verbal or their communicate. We give the level or grade to them. That is an alternative assessment. For Malaysian, alternative assessment is for student needs ataupun special needs education. What we call in Malay is a murid berkeperluan khas. Murid berkeperluan khas is a murid yang have a something, student yang have a something needs, special needs, like autism, like what we call deaf. That is a alternative assessment for Malaysian for the special needs education. And direct assessment is a direct assessment. It's a summative, summative direct assessment. After we learn, we go to the some examination, the big examination, and then we try to the direct assessment. For your information, Malaysian now we try to execute the primary big examination and the Form 3 examination, 15 years student examination. The big Form 3 we call the PT3 ataupun pentaksiran tingkatan 3. Now we try to exclude because we need to our student continuously assess. We give to the formative assessment. That is. Then why use authentic assessment? Why we use the authentic assessment? It's not meant to suggest that you have to choose between traditional assessment such as tests and more authentic or performance assessment. It's not mean, but often the teachers can mix of traditional and authentic assessment to serve different purposes. This is a better. Traditional and authentic assessment we mix to serve different purpose. Teacher might choose authentic assessment for certain type of judgment. So why we use authentic assessment in Malaysia? Okay, because the first of the characteristic of authentic assessment is a direct measure. Direct measure and can capture constructive nature of learning. Of course, can integrate teaching, learning, and provide multiple paths to demonstrate. That is why we use the authentic assessment. And then, okay, and then how the authentic assessment can be created? How? There are four steps to create the authentic assessment. The first is identify the standards. Okay, what is a standard? I will explain the next slide. What is a standard? And then select the authentic task. What is the authentic task? And then identify the criteria for the task. And then create the rubric. Every assessment should be create the rubric because we want to measure. We want to measure what are the level of achievement of our student based off the standard we give, we plan, with the standard we plan based on the curriculum, Malaysian science curriculum. That is how the create authentic assessment. Okay, identify the standard. What's meaning the identify the standards? Identify the standard to your student. Maybe Indonesia have the curriculum science. They identify the standards. Singapore have their own standard. Malaysian have their own standard, but still in the science process, is a science subject. Standard like goals or statement, what the student should, how to know to be able to do. That is the standard. However, standards are typically more narrow in scope and more amenable to assessment than goals. Standard is the general like a goal, but the example of the standard is what? Is a like student will be able to what? To elaborate, to communicate, to what? That is a standard. Every lesson or every topic that we learn, we teaching, we should identify the standard first. That is the learning outcome that want to achieve after end of the lesson. So we should be put the standard first. And then the standard, the curriculum, Malaysian curriculum science curriculum, there are 3 types of standard. First, content standard, learning standard, and performance standard. That is the standard from the Malaysian curriculum and assessment. Content standard. What is a content standard? Specific statement about what student should know and can do during the schooling period, encompassing the knowledge, skill, and value. That is content standard during schooling period. So that is how the big standard should be planned by teacher. And then learning standard. Learning standard is what we write in our lesson plan, daily lesson plan. Learning standard. Every hours of science subject, they have 1 or 2 or 3 learning standard. Learning standard is a predetermined and achievement that can be measured for each content standard. Content standard is based the topic, and every learning standard is measured for each content standard. And then the last one is a performance standard. Performance standard is a set of general criteria which reflect the level of student achievement. The level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, and level 6. Always we have 6 level to as a descriptor to the level, we use the rubric. That is a performance standard. That is an example. That is an example for the performance standard. There is a science curriculum from 1 until Form 5. There is the age 13 years old to 18 years old. That is the curriculum standard and assessment for Malaysian science subject. For example, for the topic of biodiversity, the content standard, diversity of organism, and the learning standard for the content standard is student is able to what? First, elaborate and communicate about biodiversity. Second, justify the needs to manage biodiversity effectively. Notes. The note is the activity suggested. Teachers can create any activities to achieve this learning standard. But in our curriculum, the notes are suggested by what the activity should be do for the learning standard. That is the standard should be known. And then that is a performance standard. What we said need the performance standard. We have the performance level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and the descriptor for the level. Level 1, recall the knowledge and science skill on biodiversity. Level 2, understand and explain biodiversity. Level 3, apply knowledge. Level 4, analyze knowledge. Level 6, evaluate. And level 5, evaluate knowledge. And level 6, design a task knowledge. That is the Bloom taxonomy, based on the Bloom taxonomy. to the descriptor for the performance level. That is the performance standard for the biodiversity topic. That is the standard. And the second one is what? The second one is how to select the accounting test. After we go to the standard, how to select the accounting task. Find the way students can demonstrate that they are fully capable of meeting the standard. How? So the teacher should be select or creative to plan the task. The language of the well-written standard can be spelled out. The language, the observation. What task should be asked to our student? What task? To demonstrate their mastery of it. A task that gives the student to the opportunity to illustrate. The task should be give the opportunity to illustrate, perform, or demonstrate what the student know, what the student understand, and what the student can do. That is the task that the properties or the selective of the task should be. Okay. Then the third one is identify criteria for task. Identify the characteristic of good performance on that task, the criteria that is present in your student work. The criteria that mean the descriptor. After we put the level to our student, what the descriptor can be explained. What the descriptor the criteria can be explained by that level to achieve their performance. What the teacher can ask for themselves, what does good performance on this task look like? After the teacher's plain performance on this task look like, or how will I know that they have done a good job on this task? Sometimes the task cannot achieve because the student cannot do the good job. So before we try to create the task, identify the criteria of the task. Identify the level of the criteria. This is one. The second is one. The third is the one. Trying to identify. At the end, student will be achieve their learning standard. Okay, and then create a rubric. Create a rubric. When we have the criteria, we try to create a rubric. For assessment, the rubric is a very important as to our reference. No rubric, no performance, no explain the performance of our student. The rubric is very important. For each criterion, identify two or more level performance along which student can perform, which will sufficiently discriminate among student performance for that criterion. The combination of the criteria and the level of performance for each criterion will be your rubric for the task. Try to create the rubric. The rubric should be what? Should be valid. Should be valid and reliability. And valid.
Excuse me, Dr. Saad, could you please go faster on the presentation?
Okay. Thank you. Okay. And then there is an example of the rubric. The example of the rubric. The rubric, we have the holistic rubric and analytic rubric. Okay, you can see the holistic rubric, the score and the criteria, and the analytic rubric is a criteria and the descriptor of the criteria. This is analytic rubric for the science. And then, okay, that is the measurement of the Malaysian student based the conceptual framework to science curriculum. At the end, we want to the thoughtful science learner. What we do is through the inquiry based on three domains, is knowledge, skill, and value. All of the knowledge, skill, and value we assess through the thoughtful learning involving scientific and thinking skill. That is the Malaysian conceptual framework for science curriculum. And then Okay, this is a science assessment. The science assessment, we have the themes, and we follow to the main domain, which is knowledge, skill, and value. At the end, we want to what? We want to understanding the student in the specific context standard holistically. Okay, and then there is a descriptor for the knowledge, performance level 1 to 6, and the descriptor of the knowledge, and this is descriptor for the skill, performance level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. This is for skill, and the one this is for the value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, that is the descriptor and the assessment for the each knowledge, skill, and value. For the organization science of curriculum standard, from 1 to form 5, the science subject is built based on 4 disciplines. It's a like Singapore 4 disciplines. There is a biology, chemistry, physics, and earth science. Our 4 disciplines are arranged into 5 themes. There is a scientific methodology, maintenance, continuity of life, exploration of element in nature, energy, and outer space. They are the themes of the science curriculum for the primary school, right? And at the end, the conclusion. The conclusion is what? The assessment is what? Does teacher needs to evaluate people or student collectively and holistically through all aspects during learning process continuously, and that continuously and various method tasks, a variety of tasks such as achievement in topical tests, observation, exercise, presentation, response verbally from the student, and group work. Teacher can make professional consideration. This is the professionalism of our teachers. Should be professional consideration, no bias to measure of our student. No bias. Should be professional consideration to evaluate overall performance level based on teacher experience, intelligence, and then this is a perumpamaan. Assessment is the engine which drives student learning. Remember, assessment is the engine. So how we got the best engine? We should be the assessment. Our feedback is the all which can lubricate this engine. So that is the assessment, meaning to develop our student achievement and holistically. Okay, thank you very much for the gift or the opportunity to share the knowledge about the assessment from the Malaysian perception.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Saad. So we still have about thank you very much. We still have about 7 minutes for a Q&A. Are there any participants who would like to ask question to Dr. Saad? Okay, so we have one question in the chat box from Mrs. Siti Masita. I want to give online assessment to students who will later become teacher candidates so that they have digital literacy. What assessment is suitable for them? Should we use assessment for learning, assessment as learning, or assessment of learning?
Okay, thank you.
Saad? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. The Masita from Masita, isn't it? Okay. What we want to use as learning, for learning, or of learning, it depends to our standard. And at the end, we want to achieve of the learning outcome of our student. Okay, for the digital online learning, we should if we want to check our student achievement during digital or during learning, you should have the assessment of learning. It depend to you. During the learning, we can ask the student, we can observe the student attitude. That is during learning. After learning, we can give the quiz or the exercise through the email or through the paperwork. That is during learning. It depends. I don't have the answers. What are the assessment special, but it depends to our student, it depends to our teachers, it depends to the situation. It depends. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Another question from Dr. Sri Yamkina. She's asking about your experience on developing the machine learning as one of the assessment. I think one of the assessment tools in advance in current science education.
Can I get the question again?
Yeah. So Dr. Yamkina asking about the your experience on developing the machine learning as one of the tools in assessing science teaching and learning or science achievement of students. Have you ever done research on developing machine learning?
Of course. The machine learning. Okay, thank you from the question. Okay, the machine learning. The machine learning. What I said that is assessment like the machine. Okay, like the machine. That means we need our feedback to improve our teaching. That is the machine that mean. Before that, for my studies, the assessment is based on our curriculum. It should be achieved when we put the standard, and we measure what we want to measure. Of course, we need to validate of every question or every rubric. We need to validate. We cannot try to create what we call sesuka hati kita. But need to validate every standard. Need to validate. That is the machine of our measurement. Need to validate. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions? Want to ask directly to Dr. Saad? Okay, we still have 3 minutes. If no, then I will go to the last questions. I just wondering if you can explore with us, share with us what the actually current issues in Malaysia among teachers in terms of assessment.
Okay, current issue in Malaysia is what we call beban kerja. It's beban kerja because
workload
and stress, and many teachers want to early resign before the age of the resign because they said it's a workload. Okay, we try to relate with the assessment because the teachers said when we try to the formative assessment during the teaching, there are so many work need to report every student, because the Malaysian have, and Indonesia is alike, every class they have 35 students. So there's a lot of students, they have a lot of report needs to report, put in the data, put in the mark, put in the grade. So that is the issue of the nation now. But the government try to solve the issues is give the information, or give the knowledge, or give the template to our teachers to try to settle the important as at the end of the task, we try for the best for our student. We have to measure our student by professionalism of teachers. No bias, no what we call tidak ada penipuan, no liars to our data. That is at the end of the student, at the end of the work, no penipuan, no liars to the data.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Saad. So I just want a few minutes quickly want to just conclude two speakers' presentation in the first plenary session of the ICOSETH. So the first presenter have already explored to us about the current interactive activities for science education, and I think that one is really main issues in our current curriculum, especially for curriculum Merdeka that we will have already been released by the government. It looks like we will go to more scientific, integrative scientific in our curriculum and in the next science education in Indonesia, and I think all the world also go there. And the second presenter introduced us about the assessment, which is also important to be considered and to be researched continuously to get more details, more advanced tools to assess our students effectively. So as moderator, I would like to thanks again for those speakers and would like apologies for any inconveniences. Thank you very much and see you next session. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Murni Ramli, for being the moderator for the first session of the plenary lecture. We will continue to the second session of the plenary lecture with our moderator, Professor Fitria Rahmawati from Chemistry Department, Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Sciences, Universitas Sebelas Maret. Please welcome Professor Fitria Rahmawati. Time is yours.
Thank you very much, MC. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
I'm going to lead this second session, in which we have up to 11:50, and we will divide this section into two parts also, because we have two speakers. The first one will be Professor Sutarno from Universitas Sebelas Maret, and then the second speaker will be Dr. Jose Manuel Diogo Mantecon from University of Cantabria, Spain. The second section will be divided into two parts. At first, Professor Sutarno will provide talk for about 40 minutes, and then followed by 10-minute Q&A. And then after that, Dr. Jose Manuel Diego will provide a talk for the next 40 minutes, and followed by 10 minutes of discussion or question and answer. And before we start with Professor Sutarno, I'm going to read his short CV. He graduated his bachelor degree from biology education, Sebelas Maret University on 1985, and then gaining his master degree from Newcastle University, Australia on 1992, and then gaining his PhD degree from Murdoch University, Australia on 1999. His research area is in biotechnology, biochemistry, and also molecular biology. Currently, he is a director of graduate school of University of Sebelas Maret, and there are many publications that you can find, whether in his Google Scholar or in Scopus. And there are also many funded projects that he has gained during the recent time. Yes. And today, Professor Sutarno will provide a talk entitled of Application of Nuclear Radiation in Agriculture, Irradiation of Black Rice to Reduce Stem Height and Harvesting Age. So Professor Sutarno, the next 40 minutes will be yours.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Just a minute. Could I share my presentation? Let us Zoom.
Yes, that is clear.
Sorry. Yeah, just a minute. Ooh, I can't share.
I think you have shared it, Professor.
Is it mine?
Yes,
Oh, no.
your slide is now on Zoom screen.
It's already on Zoom.
Yeah, it's
Is that
already
right?
on Zoom. Yeah.
Okay, just a minute. Oh. No, where's my computer? Yeah. My presentation can be seen from you, Bu Fitri?
Yes, it is clear.
Okay. But I can make it the
40
yeah,
minutes.
right.
Yeah.
Is it different? It's different one. Okay. Yep. All right. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. I would like to present my presentation about application of nuclear radiation in agriculture. I would like to talk about the radiation of black rice to reduce terms, height, and harvesting age. Yep. It is actually our team that work on it, and we are working together with someone from Batam. It is a national agency of nuclear power, and UNS, and the funding is coming from UNS. Yeah. So we are doing easily is irradiation of black rice or cempoh ireng in Indonesia, or Oryza sativa for biologists or Latin name. To broadly, is I would like to make better production in terms of the quality of the nutrients, and also the kinds that affect the production, such as the height of the stem, because the stem too high it means that easily to break down, and as well as the time for harvesting. Yeah. That's irradiation of black rice. The basic concept of this research is actually it is very simple. We are using gamma radiation to irradiate my seeds of black rice. Why it is being used? Because actually gamma radiation is having a so short wavelength, so they're able to reach the DNA and randomly cut the DNA randomly, and resulting in the mutation. Yeah, in my team of black rice irradiation research selection, we use the dose of 200 to 300 gray of the gamma radiation, because it was done since a couple of years ago. So actually, there were already many steps we did it. It does the result of the random mutation already resulting many generation, and right now it's already in 6, even 8 generations of black rice. And because the actually it's quite long and time consuming to do this. Right now, it's in that I would like to present is from the 6th generation of the black rice that we already irradiate and being selected. Those mutation that occurs that I already selected is actually due to the combination of genes which high mutation frequency. And we already do a couple steps in the selection, because when we are just after being irradiated and we are planted, so many kinds of mutation occurs, and we should, and we have to, not still, we have to select in the field. So every time we already done the plantation for one period, and then we do another period to make better and better, and to make the in one form of the generation. Yeah, actually, this mutation can be used to increase plants' performance in terms of characters such as physiology, morphology, as well as in the anatomy. And the objective of our research, my team research in selection is actually, in general, is to increase the quality of the products resulted of the blending of black rice or Desa Sativa or Cempoireng in Indonesia through many selection steps. There are basically 3 kinds of steps that we do. 2 of them is already done, and right now is in the process of finishing. Is in the 3rd step. The first step is selection to reduce the stem height. Why we should reduce it? Originally, the height of the Cempoireng is about 1.5 meters or 150 centimeters. So it is easily damaged when in rainy season, and there is a heavy rain. It's very easy to broken, or when there is a strong wind. So in short, we are already able to reduce the height from 150 centimeters to about 130 centimeters right now. So the habitats of the plants quite better, a bit strong, and that if there is a strong wind, it is still quite good in facing that the wind. The second step we already done also is in harvesting age. In terms of the harvesting age, normally about 140 to 150 days. And right now we already able to reduce it to about 120 days can be harvested. So we make shorter, about 25 to 30 days shorter than normal one. So in terms of the time, is getting shorter, and we can harvest more quickly than normal one. And the third steps there right now is already some of them done, is to increase the quality of the rice so that the taste of the rice is better. Might be, if able to, is to make a similar to the normal rice. It's just being done and not complete yet. Especially, we would like to make the black rice with the content of nutrients and anthocyanin getting increased. Yeah, this is the 3 kinds of research in biology regarding with black rice in molecular research. Right now is still being done by many students from agriculture and also from the Faculty of Natural Sciences. And also the selection of anatomy and physiology of black rice is almost finished, and physiology research is in animal. The physiology research in animal is to apply to know whether the black rice that in the future will be used for increasing the quality of health of human being, being applied to animal first, and to make research in that. The molecular research, they're already being done is using RIBD, where it's being done by my students. Then I can show you the result. It's just like this. That is the result of the RIBD that showing the difference, so many difference between between groups of selected rice, even from generation to generation. And this is the profile of gluten protein content analysis. So except the RIBD, actually many students is doing with microsatellite, and some of them is doing the two-node profile of gluten protein contents in the cempoa ireng after irradiation. That is make the rice getting a bit soft and like gluten rice. Yeah. Right now it's still in the process of how to increase the taste of this, because might be if you already eat the in Solo there are many red rice here, beras merah. The taste of the black rice is similar to that, and we would like the texture is getting a bit soft and maybe higher the gluten contents in it, so make better taste actually, but not finished yet, not complete yet. Yeah, that is the result of the gluten protein profile analysis. That is using the SDX page pattern, the SDX page pattern of gluten protein in cempoa ireng variety of black rice, and third generation radiated with gamma ray. So that is some comparing between group that being irradiated with 0 as control, and also with 200 and 300 grade. The result of gluten protein content analysis, that is in terms of different the grade that being used from 0 to 100 and 300 gamma ray is like this, the content of the protein, and the conclusion from this first part of this research is that the results show that 4 gluten proteins were detected when 300 gray radiation exposed, but under 0 gray and 200 gray condition, there were no proteins observed. Yeah, proteins, the proteins with the molecular weight of 133 kilodalton and 124 kilodalton, 120 kilodalton, 107 kilodalton, and 100 kilodalton are thicker expressed under the gamma ray radiation than the control. The result at 0 to 100 and 300 K radiation proteins content are respectively. So there is actually there is different, but statistically no significant. Yeah. Second part, selection, anatomy, and physiology of black rice research. Yeah. Black rice selection after irradiation with gamma ray 300 gray. I already mentioned in the front that we already able to reduce the storm on the habitats of the plants. So actually, this is only showing you that we are already able to make the plants with a better habitus in terms of how to face the environment, like the rain and the wind. So we already reduced it about 20 to 25 centimeters height. And it is quite good in terms of how do they facing the problems of wind and heavy rain. Black rice selection after irrigation with gamma, that is the continuation of the first one, the first from the first slide. It's just that is from the M4 generation. So we we already obtained short life, short stem, and high productivity of M4 mutant individuals. M4 is 4th generation. My couple students doing for the M6 right now. The result of gamma ray radiation have an effect on following age and harvest age, where there are 52 lines of M4. We after 52 line in M4 right now is being selected and selected and selected again to the 6th generation, and I didn't show the result of that because it's still being done by my student. From the M4 we already able to reduce the time of harvesting again. This is M5 a bit just from the student that already being published by Ibu Professor Nandaria. The selection result in M5 black rice of Cemboireng variety radiated with 300 gray gamma ray resulted in shorter flowering age. Ini in Indonesia disebut dengan ini ya, jadi apa itu kalau orang Jawa bilang merkata gitu ya, jadi it's already getting starting to flowering. Itu lebih cepat. It is a shorter time, harvesting age as well, and shorter term comparing to this the control one. Those characters. So from 3, 4, 5 is to make a bit much more uniform. I mean, from couples of the groups being selected, and then with one objective to make more uniform, and then finally, and there might be after 8 already stable with a good characters that we are want to select it for finally increasing the productivity as well as to increase the taste of the black rice. In the M6 generation, it is also only from couple research of Cemboireng variety of black rice on many characters such as stem height, flowering age, harvesting age, and anthocyanin is already another parameters that's anthocyanin content. Actually, the anthocyanin is kinds of substance that make the rice getting black color, indicated that those characters can be used as parameters in selection criteria due to its stability and its genotypic contribution of effect on phenotype expression. Then another students doing the research about the activity of nitrat replicase in black rice cultivar of M5 generation, that is the group 13 and 46 graded of gamma radiation in the under the cekaman kekeringan. It means we are want to know whether the variety then is able to being planted in the condition of less water, maybe in Indonesia namanya tenggalan ya, possible then. Also, there are allelochemic content of irradiated cemboiran variety of black rice. This another student. Radiated black rice indicated higher allelochemic content than that of the control plant. The allelochemic is autotoxic. The inhibition in effect of root extract of irradiated black rice was higher than that of control one. The third part, the physiology research in animal. That is actually, we would like to know whether our result from the last generation in our research being applied to animals before finally to human being, to know whether it is safe and as well as the effect of them on certain objective. Yeah. The black rice having the amylose and amylopectin content that having effect on glucose content on the blood. That is why there are many news that actually black rice can be used for curating or at least to reduce the people who cause the high glucose, or people who suffer the diabetes mellitus. Yeah, it is not proof yet, and our research is actually just starting whether the effect is significant or not in relation with reducing the blood glucose of human who consume the black rice. But logically, yeah, because the contents of the glucose in the black rice, the selected black rice is lower than normal one. So if they are eat the black rice at the same volume with normal rice, of course it will reduce it because the intake to the body is lower. Yeah. Okay, that is that's what I want to show. That I want to present. That I already present my presentation on research in black rice irradiation of black rice using gamma ray. That having many objectives actually, that we are already grouped into 3 parts, and some of them already are completed and some of them still being done by students. That the objectives that are not finished yet, not complete yet, is actually in relation with the quality and the content of the nutrient, as well as on the anthocyanin, and also the molecular things. There still too many things should be done for the next. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sutarno. Such an interesting talk about nuclear radiation in agriculture. Still, we have 17 minutes for question and answer. So, should all of the participants having question, you can write down within this chat box, or you can provide by yourself in this Zoom platform. Yeah, maybe by wearing Professor Sulis. Yeah. Yes, please, Prof. Sulis.
Thank you, Prof. Fitria. Also, thank you, Prof. Sutarno, for your nice presentation about the Cempo Ireng rice. Yeah, as we have already known, with your research in black rice will be started from many years ago until now. So probably at present you already got the M5 species. Is it right, Prof?
Already M6 actually.
M6. Okay.
M6 and yeah. And starting with 7 as well as 8, because many group in each generation. Some of them already followed until 8th generation, also M8, and but things else just started, and also M7. I didn't show that in this presentation, but Prof. Sulis.
Okay. Oh, yeah. It is better to connect it, to be connecting about our research with our courses. What kind of courses in biology department can be derived from your research in order to get a very good connection between our research and our courses.
Yeah. The most subjects that really cover this research circulant genetic, that is applied genetics. And there is a sub-heading on the selection atau pemuliaan. Istilahnya kalau orang pertanian memakainya pemuliaan. We do selected. And right now in the world is developed, the name is MAS, Marker Assisted Selection. So actually that is kinds of selections based on the molecular characters, or at least in biochemical characters. And we have many students who do that, especially in biology, is doing the molecular characters and also biochemicals. And some of students in agriculture is looking for, that is in the subjects of agronomy, that is the plantation process. So the subject is black rice. We want to select it. The core selection is due to the irradiation. However, after being planted, is actually many factors affect that thing. So from the agronomy point of view, so that being done by a student of undergraduate as well as for the master degree in agriculture, is how the effect of the plantation factors affecting the black rice, and also in applying the black rice that already being selected with content of the nutrient as well as the endocyanin in the rice being applied into human being. Mungkin Prof. Sulis pernah dengar jenang ini yang dijual di pertanian. That is how to actually want to apply our result of the selection in term of food for human being. So in biology, actually in biotechnology as well, we can put it this course, this kind of research also. So biotechnology and genetics and molecular genetics, as well as in what the name is, agronomy, or what's in or whatever in agriculture department. So many kinds of subjects actually, Prof. Sulis, that can be related to in regard with the research in black rice. So might be after this, like what we do with LPBM right now, we already put the product of the M6 in there. It's actually might be also can be related with another subjects, might be even in economy as well. Yeah, Pak Ranto already want to make course. The name is bioeconomic. As and actually he would like to make the master degree in the bioeconomic as well. So this is maybe can be one of the core of the selection that might be can be done. This is just an example. Actually, in the application of the selection that can be applied in any living organism, actually, like in plants as well as in animals. My projects that I do with Bahir University in Africa is selecting the cattle. Firstly, I do combination between the name is yeah, I forget the name is the original from Bahir cattle there with our cattle combined, and then with certain keunggulan. What is keunggulan in the DNA? And then
advantage.
So we actually want to have a look the excellence DNA for certain trade between their cattle and our cattle. However, then after 2 years, we don't have any fun anymore. So the selection program for this cattle is then not discontinued anymore. Yeah, so that's an example of selection that being done in the cattle. So many things that can be do selection based on like using irradiation. And right now, actually, people are supplying selection based on the molecular level. That's quite easy. Just go to the nature and pick up many samples from the same species, and then we can have a look to get the excellent living organism in terms of certain characters. For example, if we want to have like cattle that excellent in terms of milk production, for example, can be done like this actually, but actually, so it is can be applied in many subjects. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any feedback, Professor Sulis?
Thank you very much, Professor Sutarno. Your research will be a kind of an integrated science that is very challenging, I think. Yeah? So chemistry subject, also biochemistry, and also physics, medical, food sciences also can be joined to your research probably. Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. Sutarno.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have the question, Professor Sutarno, regarding the Professor Sulis' question. Your team has released M6 species. Would you please inform us about the estimated commercial price of the product compared to the commercial product, the standard commercial product?
Yeah, I forget that. Yeah, I don't know. Actually, kinds of 100 something, yeah, per pack in put in the LPUN, but I'm forget actually. Because Buriaton who organized that, and I do not know the price for that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, it should be more expensive than the standard one, yeah, Professor.
A bit more expensive. A bit more expensive.
Only a bit. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and a bit, not much.
Okay.
In the market, there is a producer from correct me if I'm wrong. It's from Kudos. That's even double. The price is double, but we also only give price just a bit higher than the normal one. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your kind information. And there is a question from Anissa Ayu Solikah. Professor Sutarno, based on your experience and research, what are your research barriers and how do you solve those barriers?
Yeah, many things, but Yeah, because that is we are dealing with living organism. For example, in the last research that being done by students just couple weeks ago, that being planted in Klaten. It's nearly time to harvest, flowering, and then couple days from there, there's a heavy rain and real heavy and strong wind. Yeah, even I already thought that with shorter habitats can make the plant getting stronger. However, it's too heavy because the flood is already make them all damage there. So that is barrier. The first barrier is how to challenge the barriers from the nature, wind and flood. That is not easy to overcome the barrier. Yeah, and the other one is challenge from the disease. The virus disease is we cannot see. For example, there is for human being is coronavirus. We cannot see that, and the reality is it is affect human being, and also in the plants also like that. Sometimes there is a virus yang dikatakan busuk ini ya. Jadi daunnya kemudian menguning di ininya sehingga mati. However, right now we also doing the selection for them. So because the experience of the disease of the virus, then we make an objective to select to get the variety of the black rice that able to challenge the virus. Yeah, and right now it's already being done, being selected, just being tested in Bogor right now. I hope that the process of selection resulting the a good result. I mean mereka ini dapat yang tahan dengan virus. Itu luar biasa. If we can have the variety with yang tahan virus yang saya katakan tadi, that is become one of the condition so I can sold in many province in Indonesia. Right now we are only allowed to sold in Jawa Tengah only. Yeah, because the condition of the virus. So if we can get the variety yang tahan virus betul itu ya, and itu lolos ujinya, maka kita can able to sold in our province in Indonesia. Yeah, with many other condition, yeah, because if we are want to sold to more covering area, also better condition for that. Yeah, so actually many factors affect, and some of them because our team is coming from agriculture as well. There is Professor Nandaria and Professor Bambang Pujasmanto. Also from the physics department, Puriaton and Pak Haryono from the nuclear thing, and from biology. So from 3 departments at least. So if there is a problem regarding with the plantation process, from the agriculture already know how to overcome it, and from biology point of view, we also in there. So actually the problem that predicted is already done and being overcome. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Stano. So the great barrier was coming from nature itself, yeah, whether
right, yes,
yeah, climate or diseases, and the research still continue until now in order to overcome those barriers.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, very potential research, Professor Stano. Thank you.
Yeah, actually.
And yeah, I think time is over now for us. And me as moderator say thank you very much to Professor Sutarno for providing such an interesting talk. Thank you very much, Professor Sutarno. And please give applause to Professor Sutarno.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. And now we are going to move with second speakers. The second speaker will be Dr. Jose Manuel Diego Mantecon from University of Cantabria, Spain. Dr. Diego Mantecon, he studied pure mathematics. Yeah. Okay, hello, Dr. Jose Manuel.
Yeah. Thank you.
Dr. Jose Manuel studied pure mathematics at the University of London, Royal Holloway University, and then gaining his master's degree and also doctorate degrees in mathematics education from the University of Cambridge, UK. And he has been a visiting fellow at various international institutions, such as the University of San Antonio, Texas, USA, the National Polytechnic Institute of Mexico, and also the University of Oxford. He focused on studying the influence of the affective and cognitive domain in the learning of mathematics and becoming interested since 2014 in evaluating how the content integrated approach affect the teaching of mathematics in the classroom. And as the result, during the last decade, Dr. Diego Mantecon has led numerous international STEM projects which have been given place to the foundation of the Open STEM group. So please, Dr. Jose Manuel Diego, the next 40 minutes will be used, and then after that, we will start the question and answer. The platform is yours now. It's yours now.
Many thanks. Many thanks for the invitation. Thanks to everyone for being there. Just going to share my presentation. Okay. I think that now you can see my...
Yes, we can see it clearly.
You can see my... Okay. Just a second. So I'm going to move this. Okay. So today, I'm going to talk about how to implement STEM education or STEM education at regular lessons and learning from a diverse community. In particular, I would like to talk about the Open STEM learning community, the Open STEM group, and the results we have been obtaining through the last 8 years in this research group. Okay, I will explain further what this Open STEM group means. First of all, I would like to talk about this integrated approach, the STEM approach that is promoted by the European Union and many other many systems across the world, not only in Europe, also in America, in Asia, and almost everywhere. The idea is of this integrated approach where coming together disciplines like science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And this approach implies crossing disciplinary boundaries to organize the curricular content. And now it's becoming more and more increasingly promoted by the educational systems, perhaps because of the importance that technology is having in our lives now. Some researchers also talk about STEM education. They are incorporating the A of arts. Arts translate from the English not only to visual arts, but also to the social science and humanities. The idea the researchers and educators seek here is just to provide a context to embed the problems. It can be a historical context, it can be a real context and everyday life context. And with this aid of art, also they seek to promote creativity, innovation, intercultural knowledge, and also ethics, etc. There are many different ways or many different methodologies for implementing this STEM or STEAM approach. We, the Open STEAM group, just try to focus on the project-based learning, or we use the project-based learning approach to implement this methodology in the classroom. There are also other methodologies like gamification, for example, that we are also working, and some others. But we, as a group, we have been using this project-based learning approach and also the KICS format approach. With project-based learning approach, we define it with 5 dimensions. These 5 dimensions are very similar to the ones reported by Thibault et al. In 2018. And the idea is integrating content, applying and integrating content, skills, and knowledge to solve a problem in context, as I was saying before. Students also have to do some kind of research to answer this problem or to work out that problem. That is some experiments or inquiry-based learning. They also have to design some prototypes. So we are using also the design-based learning dimension. And we normally do this in a collaborative learning approach. So students and also teachers collaborate to solve these STEAM project-based learning activities. What do I mean by KICS format? The KICS format is also an approach that has 2 main dimensions: development and dissemination. In the development, we group students into 3 or 4 members. We are asked them to develop the STEAM projects normally in the mother tongue. For example, Spanish students, we promote them to use the English in order then to communicate this project with a larger community. And they have to develop 2 files, a text document with the analytic part of the projects that they develop, and also a video explaining the prototypes, explaining more the prototypes that they are developing. After doing this work, developing the project and writing the analytic part of the project on a test document and the video, they show the activities to a variety of public in outreach activities, conferences, video conferences. We take them to science festivals, etc. I'm going to give you an example of what we do or what we have been doing for the last few years. And if I get into the Open STEAM group website, you will see I have here the website. This is our website. As you can see here, we have the institutions collaborations, or the institutions collaborating with us in different countries: Austria, England, Finland, Greece, Italy. We have the participant schools, schools across many countries that they are working with us. We have the projects that we are running. We also explain what open listing means, what the STEAM means. We have a team of researchers here. We have a team of trainers. We have a dissemination group. We organize events and training courses. And important, the Open STEAM group, as I will further explain later, is a group of researchers, educators, trainers, teachers, parents, and students that we try to promote STEAM education in the classroom. And we have a repository where we post some project activities to be developed by the students. For example, I'm going to click here in the secondary. We have 3 entrants, the secondary education projects, and we classify them into the different disciplines, but you can find, for example, if you click here in maths, you find, for example, the arts in our city, which is also an activity that can be found in the arts entrance. So this is just to classify them, but this activity involves different disciplines. As this conference is more related to science, I would like to give you some examples of the activities that we do with science and, for example, in engineering. Here we have, I'm going to show you as an example this activity. This is a floating nest. You can see here a bird. This is an aquatic bird. And I'm going to explain you the context of this problem. Here is the teacher guide. You can use this guide to implement the project at your classroom or at your school. And here you have all the details to implement, or how to implement this activity with the students and everything. So every time we are reporting the same that we are asking the students, we are reporting a file with all the analytic part of the activity and a video with some explanations about the prototypes, or some explanations of the activities that they are better explaining in a video that's written. In this activity is a real project activity that was done here in Spain, in a lake that we have here in the north of Spain. This is the lake, and in this lake we have this bird, this aquatic bird, that is in risk of extinction because doesn't have a natural nest where reproduce. And we talk to the local governments for the schools to be able to get into the lake. Here there are the students in the lake in order to observe the animal, the aquatic bird, and to observe where to locate these artificial platforms in order to give them the opportunity to reproduce. As I was saying before, we are promoting these 5 dimensions, the integrating content, inquiry-based learning. As you can see here, they are running some experiments. And about Archimedes' principle. Here they are doing the same with experiments. And in this image, as you can see, they have a prototype. This prototype, this bird with the eggs, was constructed with a 3D printing, and there is also an artistic part here. They painted and everything, and this is a prototype of the artificial nest that they are going to locate on the lake with the weights and everything. Also here they are constructing, as you can see, here we have them constructing the platforms. This is more related to the assembling, to the engineering process of this project. And finally, well, I can show you this video where they are, they make all the videos. Students edit all the videos, they put some music, and they explain in English all the process they develop to elaborate the project. And here is the team with teachers helping them to locate the nest on the lake. After locating the nest, they have to observe where they were constructing the nest here in the laboratory. After locating the nest, they do a follow-up, studying whether the birds come to the artificial nest, and whether the artificial nests are there for a long time, or whether they are destroyed, etc. So this is one of the activities. I'm going to show you another one very quickly. Also in secondary education, for example. Let me show you one more related with science. For example, the activity, a drop of life. You can find many. A drop of light. Here we have again the teacher guide with explanation of the students how to develop this activity. You can reproduce this activity in your school. The justification of the project. You have all the steps to follow. How to organize all the sessions, etc. And with photos and examples of the activities carried out within the project. And also we have this video also edited, and the photos, the video edited by the students. In this video, they are explaining how they are in a context where they want to help some Africans peers that they don't have a purification system for the water they need. And what these students did is to do some research about how to filter water and establish some purification process in order to construct a purification artifact. And they went to purification plants. They got knowledge about filtering, about the decantation and microorganism processes, you know, in order to be able to remove the solids for the water, the small particles from the water for the decantation, also how to kill the microorganisms. And they are explaining here with a solar oven, and they're explaining all the process. And finally, they present this artifact for filtering the water that they present to some Africans students. Here we have, you see all the photos with all the information, and they do video conferences to explain this. Let me show you one of the festivals where we go, and for example, we get invited to conferences or to science festival. This is a science festival in Cambridge in the UK. We fly there with several groups of students from several schools, and they present the activities to other students in Cambridgeshire, in other schools, as well as in the science festival. For example, here they are arriving at South Autumn Village, where they are presenting a robot that is solving in the Rubik's Cube. They're talking about the golden ratio. They have a dark camera explaining how this relates to the eye, how the dark camera, get the images in inverted image and representing the eye. Here they are presenting their projects in the science festival. That's the idea of the KICS format, disseminating the projects. Sometimes parents get involved, etc. Okay, I come back to the presentation. These are just some examples. After doing all these processes with the students, we have a lot of data from an example of more than 2,500 secondary education students. We have also samples for primary education and elementary. We are working with more than 140 teachers also in different parts of Europe, basically. And in our evaluation process, we do some mixed methods approach, just doing interviews, observations. We are just analyzing also the projects. So there is a big analysis across the years, because these are longitudinal studies. And I'm going to present some of the results that the Open STEAM group gets from here. For example, we found that this way of working, of teaching, foster key competences. Principally, the project-based learning approach helps to promote the mathematical competence and competence in science and technology and engineering. This is related to the integrated approach. The KICS format helps to develop competence like literacy, multilingual competence, because students have to design presentations. They have to present to different audience, parents, teachers, professionals, normal citizens in the science festivals, etc. And the combination of both the project-based learning approach and the KICS formats also allow you to develop the digital competence, personal and social learning to learn competence, the citizenship, the entrepreneurship competence, etc. If you would like to have more information about these kind of results, we have published it in different journals, and this is well, I can provide you with the references. We also found some positive results concerning the beliefs or the attitudes of the students toward certain disciplines. We have observed that working in real problems, or problems which are contextualized in real life situations, helps them to develop some kind of practical sense of the applicability of, for example, mathematics, science, and they become more interested in studying these subjects because they can see that they are applicable to real life, especially subjects like mathematics, that there are some kind of abstraction. Also, students generate some positive beliefs about the connection among different subjects. Also, they see, because we normally study them like separate bits at the school, and they manage to integrate and to relate different ideas or concepts from different subjects, and they put all them together. This is also a positive outcome that we found. We also found many teachers' difficulties for implementing these activities, and we have been working a lot for the last 8 years, trying to overcome all these handicaps and difficulties. Teachers normally have difficulties for applying these learning methodologies because they are new for them. Especially mathematics teachers, for example, tend to avoid design-based learning. That is very much used or valued by, for example, the engineers, that they try to always to develop a prototype, a machine, a robot, etc. This is quite hard dimension for the mathematics teachers, that they try to avoid this. Concerning the integration of content, teachers also have some difficulties because teachers are subject specific in many educational systems. For example, again, mathematics teachers tend to avoid projects framed in real life context because the mathematics that appear in this real life context, they are not normally simple, related to calculating costs of the material, something like that, or they are rather difficult and they have to be simplified at the secondary level. We found also difficulties for them to develop some cognitive demands in the students. Yeah, they are able to elaborate the project with their students, but sometimes, for example, teachers from science has some difficulties to exploit, for example, the mathematics or the physics they are in the projects, and therefore promoting high cognitive demands related to, for example, mathematics. Why these difficulties? These difficulties are related, as I said before, to some constraints and handicaps related with the teacher specialization in different educational systems. Teachers are usually subject specific, and it's very difficult to them to reproduce in the classroom with their students projects, so difficult projects that involve so much knowledge. The evaluation methods that we have, they are not very much in the line with the demands of the curriculum, and sometimes we are preparing our students not for developing this kind of project, but for the specific exams that they will have before they are incorporated into the university level. So all these are handicaps for implementing this methodology in the classroom. Also, time and organization by subject is difficult because the activities don't fit well with the schedule of the regular curriculum. So sometimes the curriculum is promoting this kind of project, but the organization of time, the time organization is not in the line for developing this project. It takes a lot of time and needs to mix different subjects together in the same lesson and not presenting them in separate bits. The school organization and management is also very important. You need the support of the head of the department, of the head of the school, in order to be able to implement all these activities. And teachers need assistance in the classroom and outside the classroom, because they cannot develop this kind of project without help. Families are sometimes a problem, because families are not used to these methodologies. They learn by means of other methodologies, and they are thinking sometimes that we are wasting the time, or their children are wasting the time in the classroom constructing things or elaborating things and not memorizing things. So this is another handicap we have sometimes in the schools. In order to overcome these handicaps or these difficulties, we found very important to be part of a learning community, and in this case, the Open STEAM group is helping in different ways. In relation to methodology, what we do is we support teachers with this repository that I showed you, with this web page. We also advertise them in the web page, and we provide them training courses to gain knowledge about the methodologies, about the STEAM project-based learning approach, for example. And we try to connect teachers with other professionals. Sometimes you need to talk to a professional who is doing similar projects as you do in real life, and they are going to help you. Or they need to talk to some researchers at the university. So we put them in contact to work together in the schools. Also, from the Open STEAM group, we assist and supervise teachers when they are implementing these projects, because they need some kind of motivation and help also. Important, we promote collaboration among teachers from the same school. We ask them, or we suggest them to develop the project together. Teachers from different disciplines to work together and to incorporate their knowledge in the projects for a common goal, unifying efforts for a common goal. In relation to school and family support, what we do is we use the KICS format to do a lot of dissemination, and we bring teachers and parents. We invite the relatives to participate in these events that we take them abroad. We fly with them to different regions or countries for them to disseminate the projects, and this is a really motivating part, where parents, students feel what they do is important, have a meaning, and they get feedback from others, and they can improve their work. They can collaborate with others. They are like small professionals that they work at the high level. And they see this has, some kind of interest to others. That's very important for them. We also involve the relatives in the organization of events. Parents are helping us to organize the events, to take the students, etc. How we keep this learning community going, because that's the most difficult part that we face, is students who have already been part of this Open STEAM group. Some of them, they are already at the university. They choose to study science, and they are at the university, and they are talking or disseminating their ideas with younger students who incorporate to this group. Again, we involve teachers in international projects. connecting them with other teachers to learn further. In the past, we had teachers that didn't speak, for example, English, and they become motivated to learn English and to communicate with other teachers abroad, to share ideas, and to work together in different projects. Even we invite teachers to give talks, conferences at different levels in order to explain all the work they are doing. Some of these teachers that they are working with us for many years then become trainers, and they teach other teachers to, or they attract other teachers to become part of the community. Well, that's very much all. These are some of the references that I can pass to you of the papers that we wrote. Again, I'm just going to leave you with our website, where you can find information about the schools that they are participating with us. Here we have the names of the teachers, the names of the schools, also the projects that we are running, all the project, international projects, I'm speaking. The repository is here, but the international projects that we are running, some of them that have finished it, or that they are starting. And here are the projects. For example, I don't know, you may hear about KICS or STEM for Youth projects. Here you have all the events, conferences, seminars. So in this main website, we have other websites with different projects, international projects that we run. Here are the collaborating institutions and the repository, and here we have the publications. Okay, this is very much everything. And please, if you have any question and comment, I'm happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Jose. So such an interesting talk about PBL and combined with KIC format, and also Professor Jose has informed us about the OpenStip group. He showed us comprehensively the website that they has. So I believe that there are many questions from participants. I invite now.
Yeah. So,
yeah, Murni, please.
Okay. So thank you very much for interesting presentation about STEAM activities. My question is, first one, I just want to know the curriculum design of your country about science education. Do the curriculum accommodate the STEAM or the STEM activities? Because in case of Indonesia, we still have a curriculum that focus on single subject. I mean, just science and just mathematics, or maybe in a high school, they separated between biology, chemistry, and physics. Because I think if we want to make STEM or STEM education as one of the approach or one of the national school activities nationally, it means that we have to provide the curriculum well. I mean, it should be support, it should be accommodate the activities. So I just wondering what kind of curriculum design in Spain to support the STEM activity.
Thank you very much, Murni, for your question. It's a very interesting question. About 10 years ago, the European Union was promoting a lot this STEM approach, now a STEM approach, and they were giving a lot of money to, implement, to run these international projects with different universities and schools, and etc. And the OpenSTEAM group has been, we were founded through this international projects, but the government, the educational system in each government was promoting in some ways, in the official documents, they were saying, yeah, we need to integrate content, We need to be able, our students has to be able to solve real life problems or everyday situations, like PISA is promoting, for example. But in the official curriculum, you know, as you said, normally was the regular curriculum, didn't change. In the first 2 pages of the official documents, they were promoting these things, but really in the curriculum, they were again these separate subjects. I mean, the same, basically the same contents, but without a clear guidelines about how to reproduce anything. This past year, in 2021, the Spanish curricular changed quite significantly, promoting and saying and written in their standards how to achieve some STEM competences. Is written in our curriculum today. We have been doing this during many years, but now the curriculum is writing these standards. Nevertheless, despite reading these standards, we don't know how to address them in the classroom, because still we have teachers with the same knowledge, specific, subject specific. They don't have any, you know, resources or how to apply this. Also, we don't know, the exams are the same. The exams are divided into small bits of knowledge that the students have to reproduce, so we don't have a different way of evaluating them, and we don't have a way of evaluating them in a collaborative way. So things are changing, but very slowly, because these big changes cannot be done from the night to the morning. I mean, we need to do a lot of work with the teachers. As I was saying, families also don't understand this kind of methodologies because it's different to the ones that they have. So yeah, the curriculum, the official documents are, and the European Union, and also in America, they are promoting a lot. In Canada, they're promoting a lot of STEM education. But when you go into the curriculum, it's less clear. Now in Spain, it's evident, but we don't have the guidelines to reproduce what they said in the school. Still, it's not applicable, and we are doing this just because we are running this big community and we are giving many rewards to teachers and students, you know, taking them to conferences, promoting these schools, sometimes private schools, rather than governmental schools are working more in STEM education because they have more freedom. They don't really have to exactly follow the guidelines, and they have more freedom. So yeah, it's a big challenge at the moment, but in the future, I mean, things they are going to go in that way, and in other countries in Europe is happening the same.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's approach to involve the community and family in disseminating the STEAM activities is really interesting. So I'm also thinking in Indonesia, I think it's also quite difficult to disseminate the program in school because of the strict hours of curriculum, regular curriculum. So I'm thinking to apply the STEM in a Scout, boys or girls Scouts. I think that's one is more extracurricular activities that some students can also join, and also I think we also can imitate your approach by involving the community or family. Yeah, thank you very much.
You are invited to become part of the community. It's an open community. We just are researchers, teachers, and parents. We try to collaborate and help each other. Only that. We don't have any other, digamos, commercial or something. We do this because we like it, and we believe that we can improve in some ways education.
Thank you, Dr. Murni. We have another question from Anissa. Anissa is also interested in STEAM method, and her question actually is still correlated with the previous question. Even though she is interested in STEAM method, however, she thinks that it will be difficult to apply this method to Indonesia, because school in Indonesia mostly focus on theory. And what is your recommendation for teachers to start implementing this approach?
Well, I think it's rather difficult because I faced this, as I said, 10 years ago. I'm going to tell you what I did. I have a project with friends in Cambridge, where I was working before, with friends in Linz, in Hungary, in different countries, and we applied for an international project, and we just make a call to different teachers who wanted to apply or to implement this approach in the classroom, and we were offering them, to have the students collaborating with others internationally, for the teachers also traveling and have some kind of rewards. We were getting some materials for the schools through the money we were getting for the projects, and we were starting when I make the first call. 140 teachers came to the talk, and only 3 teachers thought that they were able to do the implementation of the projects that we were planning to do. And from these 3 teachers, only 2 finished the year with us, trying to implement this methodology. But after getting some results and the students getting some products and presenting them in a conference, we organize a conference, and we do a lot of dissemination. When you receive money from a competitive project, they ask you to do dissemination, and that we noticed that was very important for teachers and for the school, because they become well recognized in the local context, and they were advertised in the newspapers and the TV, and then everyone became more interested. And these 2 teachers talked to other teachers, and then we start running the community. That's why I spoke about the community. The community is very important, because one teacher cannot do anything because he has many barriers. As Nurmi said, and others, the constraints of the curriculum, the hours, you have to teach the subjects in a separate ways. So you have to start probably doing a hybrid implementation, like doing some hours in the schools with another teacher, or you as a researcher can help to do the implementation, and some hours out of the school, and then just present your work to others in order to start disseminating, calling the attention of others to work and see the results. These projects are really motivational, because you are constructing things that they are real, and then you show to others, and then they may work for others. And then that's the way of starting, I think. It's a very hard way, but finally it's very motivating, and teachers get a lot of knowledge about the subjects themselves. They're telling me every day that we are learning more and more. We are learning English and learning knowledge. I'm acquiring knowledge from other subjects, from the same subject. Sorry. So this is a process also for them to learn different ways, because they are used to just to giving normally a lot of theory and teaching procedures. And here teachers have to think also how to solve the problems, how to organize students. And yeah, it's a hard work. It's a very hard work.
Yes, it's hard work and long way to go there.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you. And then another question from Wahyudi. He want to ask whether the Open STEAM group also focuses on the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs issues that are a concern in education worldwide.
Sorry, you're asking whether we develop courses? Yeah.
No, your group, the Open STEAM group.
Yeah.
Focuses also on the Sustainable Development Goals or not?
Yes, we focus also on the sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the main idea. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Thank you. Still, we have time for about 5 minutes. If there are any questions from audience or participants, I invite Professor Sulistyo, please.
Thank you. Prof. Digo, I would like to get an explanation from you about the changing from STEM to STEAM. In the case of STEM, you didn't use art, but in the STEAM project, you use art. What kind of art characteristic for your research?
That's a very good question. As I said, at the beginning, many years ago, we were talking just about connecting science and mathematics. Then with technology start to having a big impact in education. Then in America, they start talking about the MST, about mathematics, science, technology together. And then in order to give a context to science, mathematics, and technology, they introduce the E from engineering. So, and then we have the STEM. And now they want to incorporate like all the subjects together, and they incorporate the A of arts, which doesn't mean only visual arts, but means also, to introduce history, to give a context to the problems. The idea is to giving a context and to join, as many subjects or ideas or knowledge, skills from different disciplines. That is the idea. The thing is, not all the projects can incorporate or don't incorporate all the disciplines at the same time. Sometimes there are projects that don't have arts, other projects has less, mathematics or less science, as I was saying. When you come to real projects, it is difficult to balance the disciplines. And this is something that we also identify. If you come to real projects, it's very difficult to balance. Sometimes we work in conceptualized projects. If I can share my screen again, I will show you, for example, teachers specialized in mathematics, they have many problems to incorporate in the projects the curricular content, related to their course, to, for example, secondary or elementary education. And they do more contextualized projects than real projects. Let me show you one of them, for example. This, for example, that were arches in our city. This project was run here in the north of Spain, And you know, in the school, they have a theater group, and in this theater group wanted to build a wall with an arch in order to they want to perform something typical from the city in which they live, and they need this kind of wall with this arch. And then they ask other students in the school to constructing this wall. And what the students do, this is a simple activity for 13, 14-year-old students. What the students did is when they went to the downtown and they took a small perimeter in the old town, and with a telephone and a laser, they were making photos of all the arch in the city. You see all the art, and they were measuring the diameter. Okay, this was the artistic part when they were understanding the meaning of arch, the architecture, and also they were studying the number of stones that each arch has. And they wanted to construct the wall with the most representative arch of the city. So basically what they do is simple statistics in order to identify the more common arch in the city. And that's the way the one contains 9 stones and has the stones are representing 20 degrees. And this is the PDF, the document with the analytic part. But as you can see here, they use, I don't know if you know GeoGebra, they use a technology to, but they have music also, to explain how they analyze this data. They went out to the town and they make the photos, they took the measures, and they are implementing the photos in this program, the GeoGebra program, that allows you to analyze data, to do some modeling with the data. And here they were applying technology in order to calculate all here the diameter. They were entering the data and basically doing all this statistics part. And here they are studying about all the arts part. And well, after doing all this analysis and identifying these results, they start with the design dimensions that I was highlighting before. And here we have the other video where the students are constructing, basically before are designing what they want, and that's what they want. They want a wall 4 meters long and 140, 2 meters, 2 meters also tall, and 140 here the diameter of the arch. And this is the first idea. And in order to construct the real arch, they use polystyrene boards. They have to think about how to assembling this. Here the engineering dimension is quite powerful because they have to think about the best way to assembling the material in order to be stable. There is also another artistic part here where they have to paint, and students who are studying visual arts they were working a lot here about representing the stones, you know, drawing stones in this polystyrene material, painting it and making real. So in a way, this is a contextualized project to work more mathematics and arts, you know, and that was the idea. And then at the final stage, we have here the group of theater representing or performing the work. Okay, so this is probably a less real problem, but a contextualized problem in order to work art and mathematics. And as you can see here, probably you don't find a lot of science or other things, you know, or it's more difficult to find.
Okay. Fortunately, your science and mathematics become more fruitful, more interesting, and more artistic. Is it right, Prof. Tigo? Yeah, but in my opinion, it is better to all of our teachers must be more creative and more critic. Yeah. Thank you very much, Prof. Tigo, for your explanation.
You are very welcome. Many thanks.
Yeah. What a wonderful way to combine art with mathematics. Thank you very much, Professor Jose, but time is over now and we have to finish this second section. Thank you very much. Give applause to Professor Jose.
Many thanks. Thank everyone and take care. Okay.
Okay. Me as moderator will close this second session by saying Alhamdulillah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Professor Fitria Rahmawati, for being the moderator for the second session of the plenary lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the end of the plenary lecture session. The next schedule will be the parallel session. The breakout room will be opened at 12:45 p.m. and the parallel session will begin at 1 p.m. Jakarta time. Once again, we give many thanks to all of our wonderful speakers today. We thank every committee member, especially for the Doctorate Program of Science Education, Faculty of Teacher Training and Education, Universitas Sebelas Maret, for the wonderful accommodation. I am, as the Master of Ceremony for this conference, will sign off. Stay happy, stay healthy, and see you at the International Conference on Science Education and Technology 2023. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam.
lagi nganterin Mas Anab ke masjid.